Thank you. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of Thursday, February 21st. This meeting is in the Robert M. Thornton Room, room 24 at Town Hall. This meeting is also being recorded by NCM. So with that, let's get to the agenda. The primary things we're doing in the agenda today, going over the preliminary budget from portions of general government. But before we do that, a couple housekeeping items. First is acceptance of minutes from the January 30th meeting.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous. Thank you very much. Next item are a couple of reserve fund transfers. Tony, Tom, want to talk to them? Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Hello, everyone.
Good evening,
Hello
Tom.
I'll speak to the first one, and then Mr. Mizuko will speak to the second, where the Board of Selectmen voted on Tuesday night to request a reserve fund transfer of $5,200 into the Selectmen's Salaries account. The reason for this is that our recently retired executive assistant, Fran Gesso, was entitled to a payout for accumulated vacation time, et cetera, of $21,000 and change. And so as a result of the higher down effect of Christina Mulvihill, who was the administrative assistant, was promoted after a search to Fran Gesso's position, and we have hired somebody to take Christina's job at number 2, which I want to talk about in just a second. But as a result of the higher down effect and having left the second position vacant for about 7 weeks, we were able to reduce the delta to $5,200. So that's what we're requesting here.
Okay. Discussion by the board.
Just a question. We had talked either last year or at the end of the previous year about trying to deal with these potential retirements. We all know that they have banked vacation funds, and whether we were going to establish either a line item with funds in to try to deal with it, or to have the departments be a little bit more careful about knowing or trying to understand who may retire and try to forecast some budget monies, because the amount of vacation time is well known, it's a public record, so we should be able to see that instead of worrying about trying to come outside the budget arena and go through the cash, the reserve fund transfer.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
So
Tom?
we did look at that, I think we had $100,000 in the first pass of the budget, and,
That's-
choice, cut
Right.
a person or cut a fund. So, it is a long-term goal that we wanna do, because I think it makes sense. But we're not able to do it in this budget. How that cuts.
Okay.
It's particularly challenging in the smaller departments where they don't have any leeway. You're sort of always, department of 2, you're always staffed at 2, then you're down to 1, then you're up to 2. Police, fire, public works, you have a little bit more flexibility in the budget there to be able to absorb
Right.
it. I'd love to have a line for uncompensated absences at some point, but it's just difficult to, it's difficult to project.
Well,
It's
if-
not that difficult to project. To Dave's point, we could reasonably figure out what we need. It's a matter of just,
Right.
how do we create that line and where do we-
Right, well, I mean, if we get a positive result in June and we do have some funds, and that's something certainly I think we should look at for next year. I think David makes a good point. Judy?
This is the second one. We had one earlier in the fall, and it is because of the payout. In her case, it was a payout of how much, $21,000
Correct.
with her vacation and her 20% sick time and all of that.
Correct. I have it broken out here.
Okay. I mean, I agree with David very much, but it hasn't happened. We did it in the fall for a situation similar.
Okay.
So I'm for putting the reserve fund transfer through.
Okay. Is that in the form of a motion?
I will make that motion if you allow me where I spoke on it.
That's
Second.
fine.
Okay.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous. Thank you very much. And again, next year, hopefully, we will have a fund that's dedicated to these. Great, thank you.
Who's the new person?
Thank you.
And when is she going to start?
Her name is Eva Kelly, Aoife. Eva Kelly. She hails from County Tipperary. a fact which will be evident when you hear her speak, and graduated with a master's in public administration from the University of Limerick, and comes to us from the town of Brookline most recently, where she was served in an administrative capacity, and well, she has served in a couple of administrative capacities, most recently in the IT department. So she's a crackerjack IT person. I think you're going to love her personally as well. So she begins on March 4th.
Okay.
17th.
Oh.
She needs some warm-up time.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we're really excited to have her, and we're equally excited to have Christina stay and move up into Fran's old job. So-
Excellent,
Yes.
very good.
So,
Very
Great.
good. Thank you.
thank you for your
Thank you.
consideration.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you,
Nico.
Tom. Okay, the next reserve fund transfer is the fire medical account,
Can
$25,000.
we come over there, or am I good here, Mr. Chairman?
Hmm?
Can we come over there, or
Leave it up to you.
Yes.
I'll join you at the table? So this line item, which we should probably retitle, is actually our IOD, or our workers' comp costs for
Right.
the fire department. As you know, police and fire in the Commonwealth don't actually receive workers' comp, they receive a separate legal mandated benefit. So this line has run over due to a one particular injury that we had where we were billed, and again, we directly do have to pay these injured on duty costs. So it's no different than a workers' comp claim, we just book it separately for the fire department and for police.
Is Cook and Company involved in this?
Oh,
Or
yes.
it's and they're the ones doing the.
They work on
the
mitigating
check
our
and the
bill
audit and all
cost,
that.
and then we also work on mitigating these in the event of any fraud, which usually doesn't happen, but they're usually involved in that. They will also go out and get better prices for different options, and they sort of work with us in mitigating and working with our staff on what the best option is for getting somebody to return to work, what treatment is out there, and the better cost for that treatment.
Is this
Right.
individual back?
This one in particular, I don't believe so.
Okay. I mean, it is noted in the letter that you sent that the last 2 years, this line item was well below budget. It's something it's difficult to predict, unfortunately.
It's one of those challenging items that, and most of this cost is related to one particular bill we had to pay. I think that bill was around $28,000, and that's really what set us over. But you rarely get a single $28,000 bill in 1 year, but it was for a particular procedure.
Okay.
Do we have anybody else that's in the process that we might run into even more trouble with?
It's possible, you never know. I mean, you might have somebody who is out injured on duty and they incur very little in a 6-month period. You might have somebody who's out for 4 days and incurs a $20,000 cost. It's all
Yeah.
dependent on the individual.
All right, and this will also certainly have an impact on the substitution account. That's something we'd like to talk to the chief about when we meet with him.
Yeah, we are, just in brief with substitution, for most of the year, we've been down about 5 positions. So we're realistically, when you're down 10% of the force, it's tough to keep that substitution control where it is. We've had a couple of long-term injuries, a couple of short-term injuries, and then we had 1 deployment. So, but the combination of that at different points being down 5 to 6 firefighters is a little challenging.
All right, well, we'll discuss that with him when we see him. Okay, any further questions from the board?
I'd like to make a motion for 25,000.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? David?
Just a comment, he actually answered, one of my questions was a main person at 28,000. That's the bulk of the,
We did have one particularly large claim this year.
okay. So in relation to Ann's question, I think what she was trying to get to, is there currently anybody that's out that may be projected to be out for a long period of
I
time?
mean, somebody in the pipeline.
Yes.
Somebody.
Not
We
not
have
some,
some-
we know that we can't forecast what may happen in May and April,
So
but,
correct, but you need to sort of separate this from the substitution line in the sense that this is for the specific medical treatment.
Right.
So this particular employee could be out for 5 months, they may not get any more treatment in that 5-month period. That really hits the cost of this line. It's the cost of the treatment. The substitution, of course, is related, you know somebody's out, we're paying that substitution cost. But that one employee may have a very expensive procedure, that procedure gets done, and then it's months down the road, you're not paying anything for it. And just as I said, sometimes you have somebody who's out for a short period of time, but they go, an example would be if somebody breaks their wrist, they fall and they break their wrist, you know, you're paying the cost of that injury. They're then out for a couple months while that gets repaired. After that, there's really no cost for the medical service, it's just the substitution.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Bob?
So just, the appropriation is for $50,000. Anything above and beyond, most anything above and beyond it is, that'll meet the deductible. So anything above and beyond this will be paid for by the private insurance, or what are the costs that
insurance wouldn't cover if this claim should go over.
So you're talking about the health insurance or our outside insurer?
In addition, some expenses may not be covered by insurance depending on when the claim originated. So I'm just trying to get a sense of, once we, yeah,
It could be an injury.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think that that's been the case this year, in which a claim originated from, the original incident was prior to the onset of our policies.
okay.
And because we have some long-term employees there, it's certainly possible that an injury that happened 15 or 20 years ago might result in treatment that isn't covered by the policy.
Live forever.
Okay, right. All right.
Got it.
So with this, we'll be down to $1,000 in this account. After giving you the 25?
No.
Need the 20,
No.
are you
No.
spending the
Back up
25 or
to
are we just putting
26.
it into this account to get it up to 26?
Putting it in.
Correct.
Getting it up to 26?
Yep,
Okay,
okay.
just wanted to make sure.
All right, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, good. Let's talk about the budget. Tony, I know you had a great presentation before the selectmen a couple of days ago. We're
Yes, I'm
hoping you
gonna-
can give us a,
Retreat to my,
yes, the unabridged version.
No, it's 26 slides.
Yeah.
I will, well, if you do let me just get to the end of it, it'll go through relatively, quickly, so I'll
Yeah.
ask, unless you need an immediate clarification,
Okay.
just hold any questions to the end as we go through. So
Yep.
this was an overview for the selectmen on the FY 2020 general government budget. So, one of the things that were done, has been done differently in the past and will likely continue is departments were told to submit flat budgets with only contractual increases or commodities or other necessary cost increases, and of course to find savings where possible. So instead of the traditional, well, what do you think you need to run your department? What do you think you need to provide service to the community? What do you think you should be providing to the community? It was really needs to be the bare minimum you need to get by this year. General government as a whole usually trails the school district budget by a year or two in terms of impact of revenue and expense changes. As a whole, the general government budget tends to be a little bit more stable. We're not subject to those same fluctuations in ESL and special ed that the school department is. And those costs, of course, for instance, if you have an out-of-district placement or you have the need to hire a specialist, we generally don't see that on the general government side. You may need to add a position here or there, but it's rare. I think I use the assessor's office and the clerk's office as an example. We don't have a situation that happens mid-year where all of a sudden we need another person in the clerk's office or we need another person on the police force. So we tend to be a little bit more stable in that sense. So there are a couple of areas where we had some major decreases or savings going into the year. One of them was in veteran services, which we saw a decrease of about $50,000. It's important to remember that that's a commodity cost, so if that cost does go up, we would have to actually still fund that. It's not that we can just choose to spend less. But year to date, we're tracking about $50,000 under last year's appropriation, and if those numbers continue, which we believe they will, we should be able to see some more savings next year as well. We just want to be a little conservative in what we're actually booking for the savings. And that's due to some changes in the way the staff have been processing the claims and the oversight from the accountant and the treasurer's office that has led to some savings. And you'll see that pop up in a few minutes as well. The second item in there, which is really a cost shift to the light department, but is a savings for general government, is a change in how we've handled our indirect cost accounting. As I think the FinCom is certainly aware, we don't really practice enterprise fund accounting in Norwood. We're trying to move towards more enterprise fund accounting. We're trying to segregate the light department funds from the town funds, not to change our unique relationship with the light department and the benefit that it brings to the town, but it is a little bit messy. Our auditors have continued to remind us that it's a little messy. Our light department accountants continue to remind us that it's a little bit messy. The Department of Revenue continues to ask us to please make this change and please make some sort of separation so it's just a little clearer as to what's ratepayer money and what's taxpayer money. Shouldn't have any impact on the actual profit we derive from the light department, which is our biggest benefit. But we can only tell the Department of Revenue and everyone else so many times, no, we're not doing it, no, we're not doing it before we start to do it. And we should. We do want to make sure we're clarifying what the general fund is paying for, what the light department is paying for. We also sometimes have trouble with our audits with the light department where, not that there's any audit trail problems, but trying to figure out where the light department money went, where the town money went, sometimes becomes complicated from an accounting standpoint. So we've made those changes. There'll be some other minor changes in ensuing years as well, but this is really the bulk of it. It was recommended that we sort of do it this way. We had a conference call with our light department accountants. Mr. McQuaid was there, I believe Mr. Plasko representing the light commissioners, and then Mr. Slater was there as well. And we sort of came to the end of the conclusion. We said, so do you recommend doing this? And one of them laughed and he said, well, we've been recommending you do it for a long time. I guess it's about time you finally do it. I had a meeting with the Department of Revenue last year where they recommended we do it, and I told them we were busy and we had other stuff going on, and then this year they said, so you're converting your software, isn't this a good time to start making these changes? And I couldn't pull any excuses out of my wallet to give them, so we've started making those changes, and that'll be a good thing once we're there. And third, in terms of the major savings or decreases, and these are general figures, the line item might not match up exactly with the budget, but street lighting went down about $60,000, so that's the benefit of the completion of our LED street lighting project in town, so we're happy to see that. I'd love to see that cost going into next year as well, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. We're probably flatlining there, but nonetheless, happy to have that $60,000 decrease. So about $440,000 in savings going into the budget. There were a series of items that were either not honored, proposed for capital, or outright cut. First among them was software maintenance. That may require the delaying of implementation of some of the later Munis software packages. It won't impact the core deployment of the accounting, billing, and HRS softwares, but we're not able to absorb as much in the next year as we'd like to. DPW equipment, once again, we are not funding our DPW equipment with cash in the budget. It's proposed to be paid for as a capital item through borrowing, actually. There again, a problem. Out of a $200 million operating budget, we can't find the $265,000 cash to buy routine vehicles. And just, I know the FinCom is aware of this, but just for anyone watching at home, the majority of the time when we're buying DPW vehicles or other vehicles, we're just replenishing the existing fleet. We're rarely adding vehicles on top. Once in a while, we do say we need an additional vehicle here or an additional vehicle here, but this is just replacing the equipment that we have. The airport matching grant is another item where realistically, absent from a discussion on the future of the airport, we know this comes up every year. This grant is generally from $70,000 to $100,000 is our allocation. It's matched by the state and then the federal government. These grants usually range $800,000 to $1 million, sometimes more than that. We're actually usually only 5% of it. So this year, the proposal, for instance, is a fencing project to replace some of the security fencing and wildlife fencing. It's $1 million project. Our share of that is only $90,000. Knowing that these come up every year and every municipal airport in the country operates this way, this is something else that realistically should be built into the operating budget. But again, it comes at the expense of what else do we take out of the operating budget to put that in there. We've reduced the road money allocation, which obviously irks me because the importance of maintaining our roads is critical. But that was in relation to the creation of the facilities department, which we'll talk about in another stage, another slide in just a moment. And then Forbes Hill, a decrease of $150,000. While we're hopeful to sell the building, I'm gonna have to unfortunately recommend we shut down the building. We would be cutting the water and power and just locking it up and not having any access to it. Not always the best way to maintain a building per se. However, given in the context of a tough budget year, there's other things we need to spend that money on. We need to be a little bit more strategic. Some of our departments, as you'll see, will need our support. We had some cost centers that increased that we don't really have any direct control over. So about $880,000 of items cut and taken out of the budget. So aside from our step and COLA increases and our health insurance and pension increases, there were 4 main areas that the budget increased. One is we did increase our snow and ice allocation as we try to get closer and closer to that number. You'll see later if we discuss our current snow and ice numbers, we're still, for what's been a mild winter so far, we're still expending a heavy amount of snow and ice funds. At this rate, to match with the cost increases, we'd be doing this for, I'd say, at least 7 or 8 years, depending on cost increases, to get up to what an average snow and ice year is. And mind you, that is just on the general government budget. Doesn't count the airport budget, and the school budget is overdrawn this year as well for snow and ice. Solid waste and recycling, an increase of about $100,000. Unfortunately, due to changes in the global marketplace, we are seeing our recycling costs go up quite a bit. I do anticipate that to continue annually. When our 5-year contract is up in a few years, who knows where the global market is going to be, we may see a substantial increase there. The fire department increase of $115,000 is related to 2 primary items. One of them is the mid-year addition of a second command position, a second deputy chief position to address training. The other item is actual more funds for training. The command structure at the fire department is inadequate. It's dated. It doesn't match our other large departments, and it doesn't match other fire departments. We all know that Chief Greeley retired earlier in the year, and he was successful, and he was a very good chief, but he retired because of stress. The stress of the job, he could not go further beyond another 5 years, and he was very open with that with me. He was happy with the time he served with the town, but we're going to continue to turn fire chiefs over in relatively short order or not procure good fire chiefs if we don't change that command structure. You have to remember that when you look at the command structure of the fire department, it's a chief and a deputy chief, and that's really it. There's one union in the fire department, whereas if you compare it to the police, there are 2 unions there. The police chief's command staff is in a separate union. His 4 lieutenants all work administrative shifts during the day, helping to manage the department as well as his deputy chief. The 4 captains we have do a great job in Norwood, but they are effectively foremen for their crews, working with their crews. They do not work an administrative shift. Chief Brooks, for instance, is able to meet with his command staff of 5 every single day. Chief Brooks might run into the deputy chief on a daily basis, but it's maybe 2 or 3 times a year that he's able to sit down with all of his captains and his lieutenants. So the command structure is weak, it's ineffective, it's not the people that are in the positions, it's how it's structured. And as you all know, we have had a challenging fire department. I mean, they're good men and women and they do a good job for the town, but there have been a lot of challenges at the department for many, many, many years. And unless we start changing things, we're not gonna see different results. So there's a desperate need for a change in how we structure command over there to provide a different level of supervision, and in particular to provide a training officer. Routinely, going back probably 8 or 10 years, every officer's meeting at the fire department, their #1 request has been a training officer, and that has not unfortunately made its way to the surface. And it is this year, after I've been meeting with the chief and with George Maurice coming on board, that it's time we start doing that. Unfortunately, a majority of our training in the fire department actually goes to the EMS side, which is necessary. There's a lot of requirements that need to be kept up there, but we actually don't do as much fire training as we should be doing. One example of that is we have 4 fire groups, 15 men and women per group. Each group is assigned to a day. That's the group of people who will respond to a fire situation or an EMS situation. Those 15 firefighters never actually all train at the same time. So if there was ever a serious incident, if a large building was on fire and the entire department deploys, those 15 men and women don't actually all train at the same time. We do some daytime training, but if there's an ambulance call, 2 guys go out. There's an ambulance call, 2 girls go out. There's a small brush fire call or a small accident call, 4 guys go out. We never actually train the entire groups together. That's a very dated way to go about fire training. It's something that seriously needs to be addressed. The cost of doing it is relatively prohibitive, so we can't send that 15-person member out to an academy somewhere. That becomes a little difficult. The addition of the deputy fire chief, in addition to solving some of the command issues and relieving a little of the pressure of the command situation that we have, is gonna be our primary training officer. They're not just gonna set up the training schedules, we're gonna send them to the training to be the trainer, to actually train our fire groups all at the same time. The additional money in there adds for each group, just to start, we'll be able to have 1 full day training shift per year. So that means each group will have 1 day where it is just that group doing their training. Not having to worry about the calls from the station. You do of course have to bring them in on their day off, you do have that overtime cost, but we're not doing that, and it's a critical flaw in our training. We're hopeful that down the road it might actually lead to an ISO rating increase, and for those of you who don't know what it is, every community, their homeowners and business insurance is rated by the ISO, and you pay a rate based on how the risk level of the community, and there are a lot of factors in there, the water pressure, distance to a hydrant, things like that. We think if we can increase our training level and increase our training skills, we might be able to actually help that ISO rating, which would help the average homeowner and the average business owner. I'm not making any promises you're gonna see that July 1st, because this is gonna take a couple of years to implement. And the plan is over the next 4 years to add to the fire department training budget each year, so that we can at least do a quarterly training of each group, a whole group on their own. And sometimes it's a matter of whether it's equipment training, depending on the year what you need to do, but we don't actually do whole group training in that, on the fire side alone, because remember, there's 15 people there, most of them are certified as paramedics, 4 to 6 will run the ambulances, the rest are running fire apparatus. But if we have a serious issue, all 15 of them are going to respond to it, and we need to be able to have all 15 of them respond and train together. About half of our officer crew, or half of our firefighter crew, they've actually trained at different academies. Now we try to make sure everyone goes to the state academy, but we have guys who went to the Brockton Academy, to the Brookline Academy, to the Cambridge Academy. So the training of the department really has not been adequate in many years, and that's our fault for not adequately funding those resources, but it's time that we start making a change there.
Mr.
Can I
Chairman.
just add?
Yeah.
Just want to add one thing. So, in general government, we're trying to keep the FTEs equal, so we actually reduced 0.7 FTE in the accounting department. Obviously a lesser paid person. It's not gonna totally fund this position, but, so there's really a decrease in accounting at 0.7, increase here of 1. And then Tony's about to talk about the facilities department, which actually failed to get into your book on the FTE schedule, but you can talk about the FTE.
And just David, you had a question on the fire department?
Don't want to get too much into details, but I think it's a great idea on the training, especially if comparison to what you consider comparable towns, to know if we're that far behind, that doesn't do us good long term. Are there other duties and responsibilities that you're forecasting would relieve the chief of stress by shifting some of
Sure, there are a few things. I mean, the training officer is gonna sort of be their primary role, and that's what we really need to train them for. We also have not done a lot of grant writing at the fire department. Some of the staff have done a good job on some of the smaller grants. Chief Maurice raised $50,000 from a private donation, but there's a lot of, they're called AFG grants, Federal Assistance to Firefighter grants, and SAFER grants, which are staffing grants, which you gotta be careful of because you don't wanna add staff that you can't afford in the long term. But we also want this person to take on that grant writing role as well, to be the primary grant writer for the grant, for fire grants. A lot of the ones that are out there are either equipment based or they're training and skills based. So having the trainer take care of that role is gonna be helpful. The current deputy chief does do a lot of our, not our fire inspections, but our fire plan review and our safety plan review. We anticipate when he retires, that other deputy, his replacement will continue to do some of those duties as well. He also, either the chief or the deputy chief are always on call. So they rotate weekends as for who's on call if there's an incident. So having that third command position reduces the number of weekend shifts that one has to be on call. So, but the training is really the primary focus, as well as it's an additional command position. So right now, it's, if the chief or the deputy chief aren't there, it's 4 captains. So it gives a little bit of an additional field presence, if you will.
Thank you.
So the facilities department, as you all know, some of the work that David and others have done, if you were to break out the costs to maintain facilities, it's probably our 3rd largest department. I think it exceeds $20 million. We're often asked by the public, are we finding efficiencies? And the challenge is that many smaller departments in general government, there's really not an efficiency to be found. I think I used the selectman's office as an example that night, the accountant's office as an example. You have a few staff positions, you have some training money, some office supply money, and the cost of the audit. There's not a whole lot of efficiency you can find there. If you've got a $1,500 office supply line, all right, maybe you'll be a little conservative this year and you spend $1,475, maybe you got $1 off your paper order, but there's not the dollars and cents that we really need to impact the budget to bring savings to the taxpayers and to reinvest somewhere else. You can go out to bid for your audit and maybe it'll come down a couple $1,000, or maybe it doesn't, but it's not gonna go away altogether. We spend millions of dollars a year on our facilities between the utility costs and the direct maintenance costs, the maintenance service costs. That's where we're gonna find efficiencies and savings, and we're not doing it in a centralized manner. I always remind everyone, if you take a look at our whole assets, from a full replacement cost position, we own $500 million worth of buildings. High schools are going for $300 million right now in Massachusetts. So given that ours is 7 or 8 years old, we're gonna wanna make sure we're maintaining these. You need to do it in a centralized manner. You need to have a facilities department that has resources to make differences and to make changes and make decisions during the year, but you need to do it in a centralized manner. One other point that somebody always brings up, our department heads on the general government side, function as their facility and their building managers. So the fire chief has a lot more to worry about than whether his air conditioning contract is the right one for the building. And okay, he's got a leaky window over here. Yes, he's in charge of that building, but he has to worry about the fire department. I need the library director, who incidentally, Charlotte is a great facilities manager, but we hired her to be a library director, and we need her to do that and not manage the chiller project. And then Kathy, who's our procurement contracts administrator and sort of my office manager, my number 3, I always say, spends a lot of time managing small construction projects. It's an enormous amount of her time when we need her to be focusing on other items in other areas. So it's really about the efficiency of finally doing this. The proposal is that there's 2 positions on the school side we would sort of move over. They would see some savings in their budget, and the work the committee has done over the last year has identified starting up with 2 positions. One would be directly a trades position, the other one would sort of be an intermediary position. I know the concern is, are we adding positions going into a budget crisis? But at some point, if we don't do this, we're not gonna see the kind of savings that we need to make. It's time we start investing correctly. Sometimes you do have to invest to see savings down the roads. Again, facilities is actually our 3rd largest department if you look at it as a department. It's an enormous amount of money and resources that get spent, and there's a lot of efficiency to be saved. That's where we're gonna see the efficiencies. I had the same discussion with a class up at the high school, and I asked them, I said, look around the classroom, how do you make this more efficient? You've got a teacher, you've got some lights, there's really no way to just say, well, have the teacher teach 4 minutes less a period and pay them 4 minutes left. It doesn't work that way, but facilities is really that one area where if we wanna find efficiencies, it's the hundreds of thousands of dollars we spend a year on electric and on heat and on maintaining our buildings. So that would be, we would book the costs for the 2 positions from the school department beginning July 1st. We wouldn't actually make the transition until January 1st, but we figured it's a way that since we had a little bit of flexibility, we would do that to assist the school department. So those are the 4 major areas of ads, other than, again, step and COLA and health insurance increases. So briefly, major revenue changes since the first pass. State aid, Chapter 70, has gone up about $1 million. UGGA, which is unrestricted general government aid, went up 2.7%, or about $150,000, and veterans aid went up over $100,000. As I mentioned, we corrected an error with some of the back-end processing to the state that allowed us to get the correct amount of aid starting next year for the veteran services that we provide. And then there was a meter fee increase last year, which yields about $300,000 in new revenue. That is split according to the formula, the 55-45 formula. Realistically, we maybe shouldn't be doing that, but here again is something where I'd love to move it over and have it just be a water sewer expense. Somebody find me another $150,000 to take out of the school budget. Not a ideal situation this given year. So that totals about $725,000. 5-year outlook, we are projecting a deficit of around $1.5 million beginning in FY21. I want to point out that the school department still faces a deficit for FY21 to 24. As you know, the selectmen have voted to put an override on the ballot. If that does not pass town meeting and pass the ballot, the school department will be making a little over $2 million in cuts. However, next year, they will have to make additional cuts. The dollar amount next year may be smaller, so we're projecting, and again, the economy could throw these numbers any which way. Maybe it's only $400,000, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's on top of $3.2 million in cuts. So it's actually, the compounding starts to have a serious impact. So that would be in addition to everything this year in FY21 and 22, 23, and 24. To the point of general government deficits, starting in FY21, what are we looking at we may have to cut? This is a list that both I and department heads came up of things that we'd be looking to remove in the next 5 years. None of this is ideal, none of these are savings, none of these are efficiencies. Some of these items were almost in this year's budget, but it's a look at the kind of things you have to cut to try to balance what we're looking at over the next 4 to 5 years. And this is with our revenue projections as they are. They of course could get better. They certainly of course could get worse. So you'll notice there's about 10 to 15 FTEs included throughout this, including public safety, which I certainly wouldn't recommend, as well as things like closing the pool at Father Max, eliminating some of our social service programs, the DPW summer help, the DPW overtime would limit the landfill to 1 day a month. So general government starting in FY21 to 24 may be looking at some hard decisions absent any new revenue sources, or finding some efficiency through something like a facilities department that may help mitigate some of these cuts in future years. So just a few concerns in general. Our free cash generation continues to be low. Again, we're just not creating a lot of free cash. If we were doing 9 or 10 million a year and spending half of it and it was bouncing back up another 5 or 6 million, I think we could be a little bit more liberal in its use. Our fund balances really aren't growing. Some of the fund balances on the light side aren't really growing. Stabilization is just going up by the DPW repayment amount every year. We are borrowing for many smaller items. I know some folks like to say I'm debt averse. That's not necessarily the case. I am a little debt averse. But we're borrowing for small items. We should be borrowing for larger projects so that when the town decides that we do want to do something and the community says, yes, we want this project or this facility, we have the flexibility to do it. Given the size and scope of our budget, we are borrowing for some relatively small items. And one item that I did alert the board to is we really are not prepared for the next recession. When you do see a recession hit, you see meals tax and hotels tax drop, you see excise tax drop, you see new growth drop. Those revenue streams tend to be very much tied to the economy. You can see water, light, and sewer all drop quite a bit as well. So we're not building up enough of a fund balance, we're not building up enough of a buffer in our revenue projections to prepare us for when that next recession hits. And people are concerned that it may hit in the next year to 18 months. So as we said, the FY20, some of the revenue changes, we did allow general government to skate by a bit this year. And that includes absorbing about $160,000 out of the school budget to assist the school department. FY21 through 24 will see service and position cuts unless there are some revenue changes. And those include, as I said, about 10 to 15 FTEs starting in FY21. We have to begin to trim things down. And I know there's a narrative that sure, just trim government and just cut these things out and it's all good. But these are services we provide to the communities. Somebody was critical of my decision to want to cut Forbes Hill, but I'm going to cut a building before I cut a body, unfortunately. And some of these things, again, may include reducing our obligation to our retirees, which will be the first time the town of Norwood's done that in its history. I certainly don't recommend that, but at the end of the day, we have to reach a balanced budget each year. We have to try to do it in a way that provides the most services for the fewest dollars. So this was mainly for the Board of Selectmen. The FinCom begins its budget review this week, which is where we are. The BOS will begin their budget review in 2 to 3 weeks. The budget information, I believe, Kathy, is all on the website? Okay. Okay. So probably tomorrow we'll have it all on the website. The bottom line of the budget is not likely to change. There's going to be some small line item adjustments to this budget as we're just finalizing salary numbers. The conversion to munis, as I told you this year, is adding an extra step to our budget process, which is necessary, and in a couple of years we will all be like, thank God we did that, but right now it's just a frustrating extra step to get things to balance. And that's that. I do have an OPEB presentation, which will be even more exciting, but we're gonna save that for after department heads.
Spare them, please.
All right. I know that, you know, that certainly has whet our appetite to hear the OPEB presentation afterwards, but,
Let's rush through this document,
can we,
okay?
can we,
So
any,
can do it quick?
any further questions, on the presentation before we get to the department heads?
I have something to say. I watched that Tuesday night. I was very impressed. It's just right on, and many of these things we all knew, and we all have tried in the past. It's a different model, it's a different strategy than what we've done in the past, and frankly, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Right, is this gonna be on any website, this presentation?
I can throw it up there, it was really just so that, you know, I try to give the board something to look at other than me when we're going over something in a meeting.
Yeah, it's just, I
But
think
we
it's
can-
useful information,
we
I
can
think,
get
for
it up
people, if you could, great, thank you.
Better fix my laptop or you won't be able to hear the, full presentation. My recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is your meeting, of course, but we can go right into the department reviews.
I think I'd just as soon, do that.
Mr. Chairman, before you do that.
Yeah,
Do you mind if I just explain the 8 tabs of the book?
absolutely.
That the FinCom just got before the meeting, so this is, kind of the preliminary budget. This is through past 3, so there's no cuts from the school department yet, even though they have voted to make some cuts because they have not transmitted the detailed cuts to me on that, so you kind of don't have to pay attention to the school numbers just yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then, let me just run through these steps. So the first one, eventually is going to be an overview of the budget, so looking ahead to the final budget book, it's gonna be an overview that we're basically gonna explain to the public in layman's terms, we hope, you know, what the budget process is and et cetera. So, section 2 is gonna be a general summary of historical revenue and expenses. I've done, at least the first draft of the revenue, so that's in here in section 2. We haven't gotten to the draft of the expense part. Section 3 is the departmental operating statement, so you can see it has flow charts for each department, department in town, you know, who reports to who, what goals and accomplishments that we're doing in each
Okay.
department, and an FTE schedule for each department. The section 4 is just a budget proposal in summary form, so you may recall that we said, you know, we're trying to do this in the format that Tyler Munis will be in, our new software. But we don't actually have access to the software until July 1st, so we're kind of using a cross-reference table to take our old account numbers and then, you know, put them in the form of the new account numbers. And so in general, for the general government, we're gonna have 3 categories within each department: salaries, everything else, and then capital expenses if they have any in that department. And that'll flow through, all the way through general government. Schools have a much more complicated budget, so their budget presentation, theirs is geared towards DESI, which is the school, the state, what they want to see at the end of the year. So you may recall that the school budget in the past has been shown by all the salaries put together, and then all the janitorial costs put together. But this budget is arranged, so it has regional expenses, and region-wide means in the town of Norwood, it means, pretty much means the superintendent's budget. So what you know, he or she's gonna use over all the schools. And then there'll be a page for the Balch, and it'll list all the expenses related to the Balch, and then Cleveland, you know, through the middle school and the high school. So that's the detail on that. So first we have in tab 4, we have the summary detail. In tab 5, we have the detailed budgets. And if you flip to tab 5 for a second, there's a numerical listing of the departments. And they're still 2 pages long, one the numerical and beside it is an alphabetical, and it's 2 pages. During the year, we took the opportunity, since we're converting, so we eliminate a lot of things that were before single votes. So for instance, we had a page that said, moderator's budget, $50. So, you know, we try to consolidate that, so we actually have about half as many votes we're gonna have to take at town meeting, I think. So hopefully it will help speed up town meeting, but all the details still there. Just a roll-up number, so that
Yeah, but
first page-
we can still put a motion forward to eliminate the moderator's expenses, right, if we
can.
want to? Okay, all right.
You can.
Okay.
So then behind that is the full detailed budget. Section 6 is a detailed expenditure list. So this, what we did was every single expense that went up by more than $1,000 from the previous year, we put in an explanation of why that happened. In general, they're mostly contractual obligations on salaries. And then section 7 is the pink sheets, which is where we list all the detail of everybody's salary and what grade levels they are, et cetera. And those all tie into the salary numbers. And then section 8 is capital improvement plan that Mr. Mizuko, Mr. Maloney put together that I have to say it's quite impressive compared to what we've done in previous years. And we have killed more trees this year because where we might have had 10 or 15 pages in the past, this is a 78-page document. So as you can see, throughout the thing, we use double-sided printing as much as possible. But sometimes we're still in the early stages, some of the pagination might be off, et cetera, but generally that's it. So you should have sufficient information to conduct the
Okay.
hearings tonight.
Good, okay, thank you. All right, with that, let's begin. First on our agenda is a library. Charlotte? Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Library is,
And I have Sarah Begg,
Hello.
Chairman,
Hi.
and Susan Pipes.
Hi.
Hi.
Susan? Oh,
We're towards the end.
yeah, it's
6:10?
6:10, just that it's no pages.
610.
Oh.
610.
Yeah. I'll eventually find it. That's 750.
A new and improved format. We just got it tonight. It's great, I have to tell you.
It's page, I have 40 of 55. Is that the same thing you have?
Yeah, a little bit
Probably not.
different.
No,
Okay.
You have the,
it's page 44.
the book's been updated.
Page
44?
Page 44.
Okay. Here we
I
go.
imagine the detail's the same.
All right. Okay. We have. Okay. You have the floor.
Well, this is my 11th time appearing before you. And we have a level funded budget for everything for incidentals, which are now called, not incidentals, but
Operating
Operating.
expenses, yep.
and building maintenance, and our library equipment, which is technology equipment. So the only increase would be for the salaries, which are contracted. We had some step raises, we lost some employees, and so, because they moved on, so there's not much of an increase, really.
Okay. Are you still consistent with what is it, the MA, the MMR
Yes.
that you need? Okay, so that's,
Yes, we're-
you
we're-
meet that requirement?
Yes.
Good, okay, good.
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
First of all, I just want to thank Charlotte for the information you sent me in regards to the Finance Commission review.
Great.
Charlotte provided me with a lot of good information, and we are meeting middle of March to.
March
have our
18th, I think,
18th,
yep.
Yeah, have our review. Thank you very much.
Good. All right. While I do have you, maybe you could just briefly tell us what's going on with the chiller project?
The chiller project is starting on March 4th. And they will be there for almost 3 months, 2.5 to 3 months. So parking will be not limited, but they'll be taking all of the staff parking.
Right, okay.
But they're trying to do everything, they're going to bring the dumpsters in or the trucks and have them take away all the waste every day rather than just leave it there.
Right, okay.
So they'll be doing demo for about a week. and then they'll be doing piping and all the other stuff, and then they'll come in with a crane and they'll put a concrete pad down and come in with a crane and put the new chiller on.
Good.
We're hoping to get air conditioning for the middle of May, otherwise
Okay.
I'll have some unhappy staff.
Okay. Judy?
That was a long journey from the day we went up there to look at the chiller and talk to the experts and so forth. But thank God it got done right, and it's a bigger chiller than it was, a little different. I know Kathy Carney was involved with that.
I think it'll be smaller, right, and quieter.
Yeah, it's smaller and quiet. In other words, it's been,
Right.
reconfigured.
Right.
I want to ask, and it's basically for Tony, you say you have a level-funded budget. You weren't asked to put anything additional in, right? You were told that's the way it is. Tony, is that what she's going to live with, and even with an override if it passes?
The library budget would not change in if the override were to pass.
It would
Very few
not?
of the general government's budgets would change.
Okay. Perhaps as we go through, you could indicate which ones you may change if an override goes through?
Yeah, it's really, there's 3 parts of the override that impact general government. The immediate impact is money for roads and money for the snow and ice deficit. And then the second part is that override stabilization account that's part of it that will allow us to balance in the ensuing years so that we're not making the cuts that you saw up on the screen.
Okay.
Okay. And?
I think, looking at Tony's slides, though, I do think if the override doesn't pass, the library did position some cuts coming up
Right.
in the future.
21 to 24. One thing about the chiller is there is a 10-foot fence that is being designed by a special company that does, I think, on highways, and it'll have some acoustical panels and whatnot in
Right.
it that will
Okay.
surround it, so we're not expecting to have any problems with sound.
Mhm.
I believe it met all of the sound, all the codes for the noise.
Good.
Is
Yeah.
it gonna
Good.
be actually lower, you know, we made sure it's gonna be lower than it currently is now, even though the current noise level is below the
Okay.
bylaw?
But this will be even lower.
It's gonna be even lower, yes, we
Good.
built that in, but it's gonna look similar to what you see in the barriers on the highway.
Right, I mean, always good to have a safety factor.
It's a
involved.
wall.
Yeah.
So let's assume that the facilities management goes through. This is the type of thing that they would take over.
Absolutely.
And you'll get very bored, you won't have the building to take care of.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you'll be very happy with that. I mean,
She can blame someone else instead of people
Yeah.
calling her, blaming her.
I mean, this is something
That's the best
I know
part about it.
myself, and I'm sure my, co-pays here, but we've been wanting this for years.
Although I do have to put a plug for Jim Croak, who's our
And
senior
he's wonderful.
custodian, who's
He's wonderful.
terrific,
Yep.
just terrific. We've had some accidents, recently.
proud of the
and-
team.
Yeah.
I mean,
in
thank
the
God
parking
we've
lot.
had these people,
Mhm.
but hopefully bringing that together under a facilities
Yep.
department, we'll get not just quick action, which we did with him, we'll get some efficiencies too.
Yes.
Okay, anything further? Ann?
We created a revolving fund for you,
Several years ago, yes.
and you will have a report on the revolving fund for us and for town meeting?
Yes, I will. And I believe, it will be on the warrant as well, the revolving funds of the town. Ours will be the same this year, exactly the same expenditures for what we can expend it on and the cap. We, fortunately, because of the revolving fund, because our budget, we have to spend so much on materials every year, it's 12% of our municipally funded budget. That number goes up every year. But because of the revolving fund, we're able to buy a lot of materials out of that, because that is in agreement with what the fund was created for. So you may know that we just offered to pay $10,000 towards the difference in the chiller, and that's because of that revolving fund.
Okay, great.
Glad it's working.
All right, anything further? Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, we have, next on the agenda is Planning Board, Board of Appeals, and Conservation Commission.
Mr. Chairman, so
Yes.
I listed them on here.
I couldn't find it.
There's a new common name, which is community development,
Okay,
and, well,
Just to explain to the people what we're doing.
And it's 175?
yeah.
at an operational level, we're looking towards modernizing a little bit and having our community development functions, so all of our land use functions housed together. It doesn't really change what the boards per se do, but the staff resources and the operational budget resources are coming together a little bit more. And you'll see that in this budget here, where we've taken what Conscom has, ZBA has in planning, and we've merged them into one operational budget. There's small savings there. It's not a large department as a whole, although I continue to let everyone know we do need to grow the planning department and our planning staff. You will see some small efficiencies there. It's these three boards that are always sending out abutters notices, that are posting notices in the paper. It's allowing us to centrally manage that. So it's a combination of really about coordinating our land use function, so we can eventually engage in some actual strategic planning for the community, looking at our land use down the road, getting the staff working together, which they always have, but talking about it and being co-located together. So we've also done that with the budget, partially because that's what most community development departments do, and with the munis system, it's actually easier to put it under community
Yeah.
development.
And again, you know, in a town meeting, it's simply gonna be, instead of, you know, going for planning department, Board of Appeals, Board of Conservation, it's one overall budget that we're approving. Okay,
And that's
Just a
page
quick
12.
example. Sorry.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
page 12, yes.
We have 3 separate lines with $1,500 each for a butter notification. You really should have them in one line.
Right, okay,
It's one function.
all right.
Good evening.
Paul, welcome.
So, having heard that, this year is a transition year where they're in the process of migrating over to Munis Tower and getting that set up. But what they did was they just took the line items from those three departments and put them together. So there's 3 postage line items, there's
Right.
3 advertising, 3 printing. And so we anticipate next year that those will be consolidated into single line item budgets for all 3 boards, committees, and departments.
Yeah. All right, so all staff associated with each of those boards are now incorporated into this one overall budget.
And this is a process that we're about in the middle of.
Yeah.
And with change, there's sometimes controversy and concerns and issue, and then we're trying to work through that. And this is the administrative budgeting element of that transition into creating a community development department.
Okay,
So who is responsible for managing that budget then? You?
That would be me, I guess.
okay,
Okay,
all right,
you're the guy. Okay,
Yeah, but fortunately, you know, the staff that we have, Ramonda Morgan has been managing the budget for both the Conservation Commission
but the buck stops with
and
you.
the Board of Appeals, but yeah, I'll have to accept that responsibility.
okay.
Thank you for
Okay.
volunteering.
Volunteering, voluntold, there's a little bit of both.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay,
And Mr. Chairman, you'll
Yes.
notice that if you look at operating expenses
Right.
last year, it's 99,190, this year, 99,190, so.
Mhm.
And they're also building up a land fund, and it's 10,000 last year, 10,000 this year. The only
Okay.
increase in their budget relates to salaries.
okay,
And there was a, Tony had allocated $4,000 for trails, and that's something that we're working on improving and expanding some of the trails in town, and you'll hear about some community preservation projects at town meeting where we're hoping to do that. We're in the process of wrapping up an update to the open space and recreation plan. And as part of that, we had a public opinion survey that was out last month. We got about 500 responses. And there was a lot of write-in comments, which really surprised us. And what we saw was that people in town generally are not aware of all of the public lands, where
Right.
they are. And they don't know where the trails are. And a lot of people said, you know, those people that are outdoorsy and like to hike or walk the dog, they're saying to go to other towns, because they're not aware of just what we have. So we're gonna work on that over the next few years.
Now, on the trails item of 4,000, how is that different from, you know, CPA?
So,
If you want me to, that's sort of a general, if you think of the Trails Committee as a board, which they are, they're an
Yeah.
advisory committee, that's some operating funds for the Trails Committee. They've really been doing everything sort of out of another department's budget or out of their own pocket,
Okay.
where, you know, if they need to print up flyers, or if they need to send
All
anything
right.
on the mail, they're sort of just either beg, borrowing, and stealing, or a couple of members are just self-funding it. So it's just like most of our other boards, to give them a little bit of an operating budget
All right,
to undertake some of their initiatives.
Okay.
And there's been a great group of volunteers who have really kind of come to the forefront and been really aggressive in getting things done and doing a lot of work, so they're doing phenomenal.
okay, all right, good. Judy?
I don't know, maybe Ann's going to address it. Go ahead with your question. I
Yeah,
have
go-
quick.
Go ahead.
I understand there was a meeting relative with the contractors for the Forbes Hill today
Yes.
to answer their questions. You want to just give us a quick update of how many packets were sent out, how many potential bidders there may be, and how many real ones may come back?
So we had a pre-bid meeting this morning at the mansion. I haven't checked in a day or so, but on Tuesday, 16 people had downloaded copies of the request for proposals and looked at it. Some of them, we could tell, were kind of tire kickers that were just curious. And I haven't checked it within the last couple of days. We advertised in 3 places for the sale of the property, in the Boston Business Journal, in the New England Real Estate Journal, and in the electronic edition of Banker and Tradesman. Today, we had about a dozen people attend. There was a number of realtors, and from what we could see, there was maybe 2 or 3 players that might submit proposals. So we were not thrilled with what we saw, but we're cautiously optimistic that we're gonna get a couple of good proposals.
What is the timeline for them to have the bids in? And what is our timeline?
So April 8th is the deadline for the bids, and the
April
pre-bid,
8th.
the pre-bid conference wasn't a mandatory pre-bid conference. So it's entirely likely that there's gonna be bids that came in for people who didn't visit. It was really a visit to the mansion, so somebody looking at developing the entire property.
Yep.
May have just said they don't really need to go and take a walk around the building, it's more the
Right.
property that they're gonna be interested in. April 8th, I think, is when bids are back in, and then we'd be making a decision within, maybe 30 days?
For around May 15th, I think we said. You can also check, anyone in the public can check, we post our plan holders list on the purchasing website, and it's updated on a daily basis. So if you're interested to see what companies have downloaded, doesn't mean they're gonna submit bids.
Right.
It
Right.
just means that they downloaded the documents, and
Right.
be able to see them online, so that you can.
To me, to me, my mind, Mr. Chairman, that's the key, it's not who attends.
Right.
It's,
That's right.
if they're really interested, they're gonna go get the documents, I mean, you know.
We had all kinds of
Right.
appendices for all kinds of information for them to look at, so they may not have needed to, Paul may have written such a great scope of work that they didn't need to come to the pre-bid, and instead they had all the information that they needed.
Yeah.
Right, but according to your schedule, you should be making a decision, which could be potentially you reject all bids if you don't like them, but optimistically, a bid would be accepted, and we would know that prior to town meeting.
Yes, yes.
Third week of April, we should have
Yeah, beginning.
Pretty
figured
good
out
idea,
whose
yeah.
bid we want to accept.
But then the
Okay.
process would start to go through the purchase and sale and all that.
Yeah,
And
that's gonna take some time to.
And
Right.
chances of it squeezing before July
Right,
1st.
but at least for the purposes of town meeting, we should have an idea
Yeah.
of which way this is going, which I think is gonna be important.
Right.
Okay.
Okay,
I did have
thank
one
you.
question.
Yeah.
Capital expenses, where is that? It's on page 13, bottom of 13.
Right.
It's $10,000.
That's the land use trust.
So it's just that, and it's just carried down on it?
Yeah.
Or is it that
So
total
we
of
add
20,000?
No, they're adding $10,000 to the,
We
Okay.
just started that about.
For future land acquisitions, and
So
that,
we have conservation land acquisition, $10,000, and then underneath it, is that a subtotal? That's the subtotal.
Something.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm used to seeing them a little differently. Thank you.
Okay. All right, anything further? No? Okay, Paul, thank you.
thank you.
thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, recreation, is Travis out there?
You have the page number on that?
47.
Okay.
How we doing?
Trying to figure out the new budget book, but we're doing okay.
Your department is very visible on social media.
Thank you
It's
very
great.
much. I can't take any credit. Katie is a social media guru.
Oh, she
Katie
is
sees
so
that our program director.
enthusiastic.
She's enthusiastic. She's got a lot of energy, and she's all over the place, which is great.
Well, please mention it, that I really think it's wonderful.
I will most certainly do so.
All right, if you could just sort of briefly talk about your budget, any changes and
Yeah.
see where we're at.
Yeah, not a problem. So the first section, salaries, not a ton of changes in that group. The only thing you're gonna see probably is the salary seasonal. I know in the past, those have been kind of separated out between summer seasonal and civic seasonal. This year, they're all together. We have seen a little bit of a bump over the past few years. In FY19, we added pool maintenance, a little bit of pool maintenance and pool tag checkers because we had a beautiful new bathhouse at Haas. It's very desirable. So we had to add a few tag checkers down there because in the past we've had guards do it and you can't watch the gate and guard at the same time. So
Right.
it was a safety issue, so we added that, and we have another prevailing wage increase next
Okay.
summer as well, so that is to account for that as well.
Okay, good. And I know, I notice your expenses, you know, for all intents and purposes, they're level. I mean, just a minor reduction, but basically level.
Pretty straightforward. We have a little bit of an increase with playground utilities. A lot of the utility increases you see between the Civic, the first
Yep.
two lines are basically the water rates increased.
Right.
So that's to basically account for that. We are responsible for the budget for the waters for all the 27 fields we have in town. We work with the DPW on that. So we had a water rate increase over the last few years, and as well as filling the water for the pool. So the utility increase you see is basically to account for that rate increase.
Okay.
And
All right.
everything else is pretty much level funded. We have some building repair items we're gonna try to take care of
Right.
next year. The gym bleachers in the gym are metal. They're from the 80s. They're starting to become a hazard. We've had a few issues over the last few years with kids getting cut.
Yeah.
They're not handicap, ADA compliant as
Okay.
well, so we're looking to possibly upgrade those as well.
Okay.
So we still have some repair items we gotta take care of.
And
Is there any kind of grant that you can maybe work with that?
Yeah, we can look into it. We can definitely look into it. That is not something, that's definitely something I can look into.
yeah,
Especially if they're not
yeah.
ADA
And
compliant.
where do we stand with Father Max? You know, maintenance, long-term.
Long-term, we're working with Tony in the general manager's office to analyze and look at the numbers as far as how much use it gets during the summertime. So we are looking at Mr. Jar and the financial analysis we did over last year. So we're looking at how much use it gets. It is vital for us as far as summer camp, which we have the two sites, both at Coakley and FM. So to take a water site off of that, there are a couple options as far as what we can do to keep one water element down there. I know we're looking at possibly what it would cost to put a spray park in there. Obviously, we'd love to keep it open as much as we like to keep it open. But we're looking at some other cost-effective options as well. Right now, the building itself is in rough shape. Obviously, it's very similar to the one we had at Haas. It's not ADA compliant as well, so there are some issues that we're gonna have to address in the near future at that building. But the pool itself, the foundation's good. There's some minor work we gotta do on that. The pump room is in good shape as well. It's below deck, so we're having a little bit of some chemical rotting issues, but we're in good shape for the near future with that.
Okay. Judy.
Yeah, I noticed on the budget here, we have capital expenses, that's the 59,000. Those are the improvements you were talking about?
Correct. So the site improvement line is actually playground equipment related. It's for $7,000 for small parts. So obviously we're responsible for the 9 playgrounds that we oversee in town. The first line for $7,000, and this is how it's broken out, is for like swings, nets at fields, slide, just minor breaks throughout the year. We do a big site walk with the DPW every spring and fall to make sure that everything's been addressed. We like to be a little more proactive. The other is for replacement for elements. It's $25,000. Most of the playgrounds in town, I think Bond Street and Doherty, were put in the early 2010 to 2012, around that time. All the other playgrounds are in the late 90s, so we would like to see if we can maybe add a few more ADA compliance. And again, ADA elements, we'll look at some grants possibly if we can to save some money. Maybe if a swing breaks, like a major item that's going to be cost effective as well, looking at that. I think the lower Balch is the oldest playground that we have in town. I would love to look at possibly replacing a few elements there as well.
And you're replacing the chips, the wood chips and stuff like that with the rubber?
Yeah, poured rubber. So we're going before the CPC, and we're going through that process right now, and looking through ADA grants as well, if we can. But right now we're proposing with the CPC is a portion of the Bond Street playground will be poured rubber. Again, it's not cheap, but long-term maintenance-wise, it's a lot easier to take care of. Obviously, with the wood chips, they're great, but they're hard to maintain. The high traffic areas, like at the bottom of slides and stuff like that, basically get bare within a week because obviously kids are running around.
Right.
It's
And-
a safety issue.
And it's a safety issue, and if you have a wheelchair, a child that has an ADA issue, it's a secondary option for those folks that have that, but it's difficult to navigate. So we're hoping that's a good, and Bond Street for kids that have, it's one of our only tot lots in town, so a lot of parents go there that are new to town and want to meet new kids, so we want to see if we can do that.
I know you've made these proposals before the CPC. You have any idea whether they're gonna finance them, this year, or they're?
We're going through it right now. I know we're going through right now, and then if they
Priority
vote,
list, yeah.
if they vote to support, then it goes to town meeting, and then I make the presentation at town meeting, and I
Okay.
believe that's how the process works, and if the
Yep.
town approves it, then we'll move forward
Right,
with
but
it.
they first have to, say that it's,
Yeah.
within their overall plan.
And I think it should be, and we're going through the process right now, and I'm hopeful that they will support it, and we'll go to town meeting and see what the town voters say.
Okay, David?
Yes, first I want to say is having worked with Travis over the past couple of years, he is a dynamic department head.
Thank you, David.
And oversees a wonderful group of people, but you've taken this department
Thank
where
you.
it needs to go.
I appreciate
Which is
that.
great. I'm gonna talk a little bit about the playground utilities, because one of the things that we talked about when we reviewed the department last year was this is an uncontrollable line item for the recreation department. This is purely what the DPW allocates, what
Yeah.
they believe, because there's no real meters. It's just a number that he's
Oh,
thrown.
it's just an allotment that's
Yes.
billed to them.
And
Yeah.
in my mind, this belongs in the DPW budget, because it's their water. He can't control it. He's just given a number by Mark, and Mark's making his best guess, and he says, okay, that's what you got to do in the budget. That's, it really doesn't belong in his budget. It
There's
really
couple items
belongs,
like that throughout the budget that at some point should get moved to the
Yes.
DPW.
Yes.
The conservation property maintenance one is another one that, for all intents and purposes, the DPW does most of that work.
Right.
Or they're the ones who are called when it says, hey, we need this work, and they go and call somebody. So realistically, there's probably several lines that should get moved to the DPW since
Yeah.
they're ultimately responsible for it anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, the summer was pretty mild, but the 2 summers prior, I know my first year as superintendent, we had to come before you to get additional money for water, so it really is completely up to Mother Nature. It could be a very dry summer, and then you gotta water the fields more, and then we're basically hamstrung to that, and we're hurting in the utility line moving forward. So it is, and then we can try to subsidize from other lines as long as the group together but that we'll do the best to do that. The DPW is great to work. I work with Mike Driscoll and Mark very well, and I give them heads up monthly as we get closer to year end, saying, okay, we've only got $10,000 left. Let's monitor this, and they're terrific to work with on that as well.
I just think going forward, at some point, we need to really try to put the line responsibilities under the right department,
Right.
so that's all. The second is just to, the Father Max pool it's not just the numbers that you see here. I mean, Travis lightly treaded on the issue about what the work required to maintain maintain Father Max going forward. We're looking at probably close to $800,000 to $1 million in needed repairs and/or replacements up there. So the idea of replacing that with some type of water park
Yep.
to allow the camps to at least have some sort of water activity after they run around is a great idea. And I think what we're gonna see is that the numbers are not there at that pool to warrant 10 lifeguards that have to be paid.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how many people are actually in the pool.
That's a state requirement,
state
based on
requirement
based on the
based on-
size and the
That's right.
volume of the pool.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they can sit around doing nothing all day because there might be 6 people there in the morning, but you gotta have,
Yeah.
4 lifeguards there, whatever. So I think it's a combination of not just use, but are we prepared to spend another $1 million on a second outdoor pool? If you look at the comparable study that we did with other towns, there aren't towns that have 2 outdoor pools.
And that has to be looked in the context of,
So-
at some point, Haas Pool itself, the pool will require work. So the idea is, where are we gonna spend this money and sort of where are we going? The idea of a splash park is that you probably have something that's for your really little toddlers to go to, so they have something that they're not necessarily gonna go to, a much larger pool. And if you could do that in a way that you maybe wanna invest that $1 million in the spray park and not have to invest it in another bathhouse, because if you're gonna build that second bathhouse, then at some point the pool itself needs work, but Haas Pool down the road will need some major work itself, so
Right.
it's just trying to be strategic and say, all right, what do we wanna, where do we wanna
Okay.
be in 5 or 10 years?
All right, that'll be something down the road.
Thank you, David.
Okay,
And just one point about Father Max, if there was ever a decision to just close it outright, that's a decision that needs to get really made in the fall. It's effectively too late in the year to try to do it now, we've already
Yeah.
printed guides, we're already hiring people, we're already
Yeah.
getting ready and going, so that's not something we can just decide at town meeting to go ahead and close the Father Max pool. If that discussion is there, for a budgetary cut, that's a decision that needs to be made in the fall.
could,
Yeah.
you know, could that be mothballed if it had to be, and then brought back if you needed to cut it for a couple of years, but bring it back
My
later?
concern would be if you mothball it for too long,
ADA.
and new code restrictions or new code
Oh,
requirements may
okay.
kick
Yeah.
in. So, I mean, maybe you could do it for a year,
Right.
but you do it just for a year, and then it's a pain in the butt if you know you're bringing it back.
Right.
Once you hit 2
Yeah.
years, usually code requirements, kick in, so
Yeah,
that would be my concern, that we could do that, and then we could
Yeah.
turn it back on, and
yeah.
cost of $3 million.
Okay,
Yeah.
But at least it's been bubbled up here, and I'm sure it's been on your radar screen, I know it's
Yeah.
on yours and
Right.
yours.
Yeah,
so-
we're looking at other options too, and talking to other towns that have spray park. I'm trying to get hold of the Waltham Rec Director, they actually have 10 spray parks in their town or city. And talking to other towns surrounding and figuring out how much the ballpark cost would be and, just preparing to
Yeah, I
to make
mean,
that
and-
decision.
What the bathhouse requirements are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the
What
question,
you need to do in addition to that.
yeah, I mean, the question really is, what are you gonna do about, some of the, the programs you have, the summer programs you have for kids,
Yeah, that's
a lot of the kids, look forward to having a pool there.
Yeah, I think between, swimming lessons are very popular, play camp at the 2 locations, and one of the big perks, obviously, at FM is that you have both pools at both summer camp locations. And between senior play and play camp at FM, you're talking about 150 to 200 kids
Yeah.
that would suffer by not having a pool there. So it is something that's serious to take a look at. And
Decision you're
yeah,
gonna
big
have to
decision.
reach, because I'm not sure if there's, and you know better than I do, whether there's enough capacity at one pool, for that,
Yeah.
to take the, the two camps with the kids,
Yeah.
essentially.
So the number of people that use the pool in the afternoon and the evening, the older people are not supporting Father Max, yet your camp is.
Yeah, the camps are supporting, the swim lessons are supporting. We traditionally run swimming lessons in the morning.
Yeah.
And then we have camp
Right.
swim time. So during the week, both pools get used basically from morning to early afternoon, all through the week, Monday through Friday. They're swamped. They're big time.
Yeah.
The after school activity, the summer program the school runs out of Savage, they use the pool as well
Yeah.
at FM as well. So there are a couple different groups that use it at FM
All right.
as well. So it is a serious decision.
And
you
how
gotta think
many
about.
people in the pool is it rated for, and how many?
I'd have to look at that. I know we're staffed for 6 guards on at all time regardless. I think, want to say it's, I forget the number of people.
Some ridiculous
Yeah,
amount.
yeah.
Yeah.
That,
I'd have to, I don't know that number off the top of my head. I don't know if you'll comfortable giving it to you. I forget what the per person count per lifeguard is, and I want to say it's something like, it's not much. It's like 10, 15, 20 people. I'd have to
Yeah.
look at that number off. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't
So
know.
what I was trying to get across is that when people go by the pools in the evening and they only see a few families there and that sort of thing, that's not the normal usage. The normal usage is when you go through South Norwood, or you go by Father Max, or you go up with your kids into swing sets.
Yeah.
That's when you get the usage. It's during the day, up
Yeah.
until what time?
Like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then depending on the weather, we let the kids go a little bit later, if it's a hot
Okay.
summer day.
They've tracked it, they've made
Yeah.
a conscious effort to track
Yeah.
the usage, so they can separate the camps
Yeah.
from other people that use it, so
Yeah.
we'll be able to identify what's going
Yeah.
on, right?
All right, anything further for Travis?
No.
Hearing none? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate
No,
it.
thank you,
Thank
very
you.
informative. Do you see if Segal is out there?
Actually, I made a mistake. He had told me she wasn't
Oh.
available tonight, so they're coming next week. though.
Okay. All right, so we have,
We'd like to generally review their budget with them, you can certainly go over it. Scal and I had a few conversations about her budget prior to,
okay,
her being on vacation, so it's her discretion.
all right, why don't we wait? Treasurer is the next one.
Anybody found the page for the treasurer?
Mark, how you doing?
145.
Thank you.
Evening. I have page
what
six.
what page? What page?
6.
6? How much?
I think the best thing about this budget is that we have UMass general ledger numbers that Tom McQuaid and Sue Bartlett put together for us, and it's a beautiful
I mean,
thing.
as part of the
Yeah.
new system and the transition,
Yeah.
it's wonderful.
Cool.
Looks familiar
Yeah.
to me.
Well,
Because it's Greek to us so far.
yeah,
Well, I just keep thinking that you combine so many things, I just hope all the numbers are right.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, Mark, you just briefly explain any major changes in your budget?
Well, I think the biggest change is that we're doing the indirects for the light department. So you'll see that 185,000
Yeah.
in our salaries being,
And these are services that treasurer staff provides for the light department.
correct.
Well, it's for the collection of light bills is
Right,
what it is.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's a big part of our
right.
process. So,
Mhm.
I think we have the largest amount that's being transferred out. We're gonna have to figure out how the mechanics of that will work, but
Yeah,
that would be the biggest thing on the salary side, except for one other thing. We got a class increase for one of our staff that actually moved her from a C4 to a C6. And which resulted in about a $3,000 increase
Okay.
in that line item, in the salary line item.
okay.
So that's an addition to what's here.
Well, I'm not sure, are we
No,
gonna
it's
We included
we included it. in the number.
include it?
Okay, all right,
But that's the
Alright.
same, that's the only change other than the regular steps and COLAs.
okay.
Yeah.
How much money was that involved in that?
It was about $3,000.
Okay. All right, any questions? Judy?
Yeah, I have a question. The new billing system or making payments per se, there's been some little problems with that? Online payments?
So the online payments for light and water, we stopped e-lockbox because it was creating some problems on the back end that the residents don't see. And so in order to create some efficiencies, we stopped the e-lockbox and ask them to start sending paper checks. So what we're seeing is that there's a lag. The time period between, it took about 2 days for the e-lockbox. With the checks, it takes about 5 to 7 days.
So an example would be like, if I was Norwood Bank, which I am, checking account, and I pushed it out before, it actually went electronically to you. Now it goes by paper check.
It's going by physical paper check, yes.
Any idea what percentage of that is to the total that you get? Plus or minus?
I think maybe 3 or 4%, if that.
Okay.
Can I ask you, the paper check, it goes to the bank first and gets credited to the account?
So we're sending it directly to the lockbox. And the advantage of doing that is that if the information isn't enough, if we don't have a bill number or an account number, we have a process through our lockbox that will do a comparison, and they'll look at amount, they'll look at the name, they'll look at the address and line up those payments that way, and we gain better efficiencies than we have through the lockbox.
I know my payment this month for cable and for water, no, for light, got charged to light. So my cable bill got charged to my light, even though there was different account numbers on each of the checks. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, and those are kind of an example of the problems that we have.
My mistake is I sent them out the same day. To fix that, I won't do them the same day, so they'll get confused. But when I called on that, there was some issues relative to, well, they would have to send me a check, the light department, for my $174, and I'd have to repay. And it just seemed to me that the process was extremely clumsy. And I'm
And that's
sure
why
you're
we're going
working-
to a new computer
Exactly.
system.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so that will be eliminated because we can do adjustments between
Right.
bills.
So that will be part of the advantages of the new system?
Well, it certainly will be once we're
Because
fully
this was a
integrated, it'll
bank
be-
issue, this was not
Correct, this
his
isn't really
issue.
an us issue as much as a bank
Right.
issue. To sort of break it down, what happens is you go online to your Bank of Canada and you do your online bill pay, and they're just sort of sending us a data batch, and sometimes it doesn't match up, so if the system doesn't match it up, we then have to go manually match it, so the treasurer's office staff are sitting there saying, I mean, there was one day we had $39,000 worth of deposits that they have to go in and manually say, okay, well, I got a Hajar payment for $463, let me try to figure out what that is. Okay, this was his tax bill. It was just eating up an immense amount of staff time. The problem is that what happens is the bank, for instance, you will go on to your online bill pay, you'll still do it the same way you did it.
Yeah.
The bank debits your account the next day, we're not seeing that check for 5 or 6 days, and then there's a 2-day processing time on top of that. So some people have lost their prepaid discount as a result of that. We will of course honor that prepaid discount as we try to fix it, but it's sort of, we had these two difficult online systems that the system didn't work for us. We said we wanted to do away with it, the bank said, fine, we can do a paper check, but they're debiting your account on Tuesday and not actually sending a check out for 4 or 5 more days, so we're not seeing it for 2 days
In my
beyond
case,
that.
they charged it to the two things to the one account.
Your bank did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Just
the
real quick,
reason,
so that's a perfect example, sometimes what would happen is, we'll get Judy Langone, $512 payment. Well, what's $512? Well, now the system can automatically match it up bill by bill, but now we've gotta go and see, okay, this is her cable bill and it's her sewer bill, or no, it's her cable bill and it's her tax bill.
But the account numbers are on the check.
They match it generally by the dollar amount though,
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
Yeah, it just seems clumsy right now, and
is.
obviously it was a bank issue more than us, but, you know,
the problem with that system is that it's wide open. You can pay any bill you want through that system. And there's specific formats that the bill number or account number has to be in order for it to be recognized as either a tax payment, a water payment, or a,
so the bank doesn't have the same account number format that the bill has.
that's right, we had to develop that. But if it's not in that order, then it's going astray.
Right.
Whereas if you pay through our supported online payment portal, you have to bring up the check or the bill, and you pay against that bill. That's the information that they're missing in these wide open,
Yep.
just pay
Right.
it. So
you're
we
working
see
on it, you're working on it.
terrible inefficiencies there because of that. Whereas online, Unipay, it's going to be specific.
So Unipay is going to be it going forward. That's the only thing that you can use. You can't go in, you will not be able to go in and use your own.
You can still go through your bank.
Yeah,
But it's a
And
paper check.
and the banks use different payment processing
right,
vendors.
okay, yeah,
So you can still do that. It takes longer, and it's not necessarily as accurate. So we're encouraging the online through Unipay.
And actually, there's a third option that's my preferred option, because there's an auto pay right with the Lake Department.
Through
So
Light,
it's
yeah.
ACH, doesn't cost you anything. So what happens is I get my electric bill, I get my water bill, it tells me when the last discount date is for the electric bill, and then on that date, they take that $86.12 out of my account. So, it's great, I get to see everything, you don't have to do anything, you know, it may be recorded in your checkbook if you keep track of your.
But they do the pulling.
expenditures, but they
They do
do
the
it
pulling.
on the very last date you can get the discount. So
I
you're
like the
paying
push.
as late as you can, you have the information with you, it costs you zero, and I think that's great. You know, some people
Yeah.
don't like ACH, so
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can't do that, but to me, it's a great system.
Okay. All right.
All right,
Anything else?
thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Normally don't take questions from the audience, but in Kelly's case, since she'll be joining us soon,
Thank you. Can I make a recommendation? If you want to drive people through Unipay, why don't you just drop the 50-cent fee? You'll get a whole bunch more people using the online system. The 50 cents isn't worth it. You're paying more in administrative costs to reconcile the bills than it would cost. Just drop that fee. You'll encourage more people to use it.
Well, it's something to think about. I know in the last city I was in, they picked up that cost. It costs, I mean, it's a,
The challenge is, for
I believe
instance,
it's about 1,800 a month. So that, you know, what's that, 36, what I
we
can't
have
do.
1,800,
water
yeah.
bills, real estate bills, and the light bills. I mean, we issue 15,000 light bills a month and 5,000 cable bills. So it's certainly something to look into. We have to add that cost, and then it has to be borne by everyone else in the system.
I mean, how much does it cost a person to go through and reconcile that?
$105,000.
You know, it's gotta be cheaper than that,
If every
right?
bill we pay 25 cents, it's $105,000 a year. That's why we don't pick it up.
You know, when you think about it, I mean, it costs, what is it now, 47 cents to put it in the mail. If you drove it down here, it would be
Cost me
probably a
anything
couple
to
bucks
push it
in
up
gas.
Mm.
So, is it 55?
Yeah.
It just went up.
It went up, it went up.
It's $200,000.
Yeah, oh well.
But for me to push it out, to send it, even though they're sending a paper check, doesn't cost anything. For me,
Well, people say that, but I have to stop you there and say, somebody's paying for it, and
Yeah.
you're either got
I'm not.
a tenth of a percent less in interest, or, because it isn't free.
Yeah,
And that's, I think that's a mistake
all
people
right.
make.
Any further questions for Mark? Seeing none?
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, see if Carrie's out there?
Yeah.
what
What are
page?
we at? Page 42.
Hi.
Hi, Carrie, welcome.
Thank you. David?
What page we on?
42. Okay, notice that you pretty much have a level funded budget,
I do.
which is what we like to see. Anything you'd like to note on the budget?
No, the only thing I will note that it's fine level funded this year, but the maintenance of the building
Mm-hmm.
is definitely going to continue to increase as the building gets older.
Okay,
And you'll be doing a very happy dance if the facilities group goes through and you don't have to, like Charlotte, like
Right.
facilities manager.
We won't have to worry about 500, just say, hey, spend 2,000, I need this fixed.
Right,
There
right.
you go.
Right.
yeah, okay.
So right now I do use my grant to offset some of my building maintenance.
Now, does that take away from
Well, it takes away
programs
things that I
you
can do
want
for the
to
center,
offer?
absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely.
okay.
So your total budget as requested, and it's a requested amount, it's not the budget amount, 462, 246.
Correct.
Okay. And there's nothing in here as a capital, oh, there is a capital? No.
No.
that was-
No,
And that was
nothing.
in the
That
past.
was, yep, that was in the
Nothing.
past.
Okay.
All right,
And again, under the override, she gets nothing increase, no increases, so it's a level funded budget.
okay. All right, David.
But, two things, but she will be able to use her grant money for better purposes than building maintenance.
Right.
Right.
So that's a good thing.
Yep.
Number two, also, as Bob is doing with library, I am doing with Kerry, she has sent me documents, and I hope to get our review of
I
her
know you're
done
working
in the
on it,
month
yeah.
of March, so
Yeah.
Great.
thank you very, very much.
I do have
Okay.
a question.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
I do have a question.
Judy, yeah.
Relative to the building, when it was built, there was a huge grant or some money that came from the federal government.
Okay.
With a proviso, it had to be attached or near schools and so forth at the time. Were you aware of that?
I was not aware of that because I wasn't there and, to the
Bernie may
building.
be able
maybe.
to answer. Is that still in play, or is that restriction now gone because
I
it's,
think that restriction's gone.
that's what I was hoping we'd hear.
I
Thank you.
actually had a talk with one of the members of the permanent building committee and, just to find out whether or not it could be, the two buildings could be separated, and they seemed to think that they could be separated.
It could be a freestanding building?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that
One
would
of
be
the
nice.
key reasons for the connection had to do with the use of the gymnasium
Gymnasium, yeah.
at the other end of the.
Also to get the money to
Yeah.
build it.
But I
Yeah,
mean,
and then gymnasium and,
Was that the first part of the
It wasn't
senior
so
center,
much
not
of
the
the
addition, the first part?
It wasn't
Okay.
so much a condition of the grant as it was, one of the points that we put forward was that we could unite these two facilities, we
Right.
could use that gymnasium.
Yeah, but in
It's
terms.
not, it's not technically a requirement.
But in terms of HVAC facilities, could the building stand on its own?
Yes.
That was my understanding
Okay,
when I spoke to the person.
It
who was
really is two
permanent
buildings
building.
with a hallway connecting them.
okay, all right.
And to
David.
remind that, that's one of the two town buildings that we say is for emergency purposes, yet it doesn't have an emergency generator, so. They, you know, again, one of the
The
things that,
senior center or the Savage?
The
Road?
senior center.
Senior
is,
center.
Senior center.
you know, that's, if we have an emergency, have to send people up there to stay overnight or something, there is no generator. I think that's one of the things that we've talked about facilities is, what are our priorities? That's gotta be
Yeah.
one of the keys, because you can't direct 200 people there and then say, oh, but if we lose power, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's not
We've
emergency
got,
shelter, so
we
it's.
have Public Works coming next. Maybe we can ask Mark Ryan if there are portable facilities, at least would be able to take care of, the needs for that short
It's an
period of time.
Excellent suggestion, but,
I'm wondering if the Savage building, they have generators in the Savage building. I wonder if
No.
that's.
no, they
No, they
don't.
The
don't.
only school facility
No.
with a major generator is the high school.
Right,
Okay. All right,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
any further questions for Kerry?
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Have a good
Sorry
night.
we're a little bit late.
Thank you.
We had a few things to
It's
do. Okay,
Take care.
see if Teddy's out there? Thank you. And it's next page, 43.
33?
43.
43. Oh, right after.
Right
Okay,
after,
yeah, there it is.
Yeah. And that's what I was looking at.
So,
Everybody, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Teddy, how are you?
Everybody, nice to see everybody.
Sorry we're a little bit late.
Oh, this is important stuff. I do have a brief handout, it's only 2 pages long, but it's just FYI
Okay.
stuff, it's just 2 pages. The first page is the budget book. The second page is a list of our 29 veterans and dependents that we currently have on our rolls at this time.
That's decreased.
It decreased.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I figured I'd talk to you folks about tonight. There is an attrition rate. Our demographic is changing. Demographic is aging, and we're losing folks, sadly.
Even though there are new folks coming on.
That's
you know?
correct. You know, in some cases, we'll lose one and pick up 2 new ones. But the younger ones, we can not rehabilitate, but we can get them back into the workforce.
Right.
Get them back on their feet.
And
Yeah.
again, the cost is 75%.
Correct, ma'am.
Reimbursement from the
Absolutely.
state.
Yeah.
So on, there's 3 line items that I thought I'd bring to your attention today. The first one is under Veteran Services Salaries. That's 015431 part-time salary. We asked for an increase of $1,000 just because we want the office to be staffed. You know, and oftentimes there are training conferences. We have 3 training conferences over the course of the year. And both my admin and I, we should attend. We should be there. We need to be updated constantly and on new laws and regulations. The next one is Veterans Benefit Direct Relief under operating expenses, 015432. There's a decrease of $50,000 in that line item. And again, due to the aging demographic, you know, fortunately, or unfortunately, however you want to view it, we don't need that much money. We're able to operate within our budget at a satisfactory level without that $50,000.
So it's more a case of, you know, you're providing services for people for a period of time, but
That's correct.
able to find them a permanent solution so you can take them off the rolls.
That-
You
that's
provide the need while they actually truly, you know, have that need,
Our-
you know,
You're
take care
absolutely
of them
correct, Mr.
afterwards.
Chair. Our primary function, when they put them on the rolls, is to get them off the rolls.
Yeah.
We always seek alternative sources
And
of
if there are
income.
other programs in the Commonwealth, to
Alternative
get them
sources.
eligible and move them over to other
Exactly right,
programs
such as
off
VA
of our
VA
budget.
compensation, federal benefits and stuff like that.
Okay, good.
And the last line item that I wanted to point out to you is 015432, Veterans Benefits Miscellaneous. That was part of the consolidation. We just lumped that into the next line item, miscellaneous expenses.
Okay.
So there was a $100 request, and that's been withdrawn as well.
Okay. All right.
Question?
Bob?
Ted, I pretty much understand the direct relief budget. Could you just describe the programs associated with the line item for benefits of drugs and benefits for medical?
Yeah, exactly right. Oftentimes,
That's why I thought it was important to include the names of our clients and stuff like that. These are actually, these are our fellow citizens. And majority of them are elderly and are living on low fixed incomes. And the drug line item in particular, when they go to CVS for their prescriptions, they bring the receipt to us, and we in turn reimburse them. And then we in turn reimburse 75% by the Commonwealth for those drug costs. So that line item for the miscellaneous medical service, or the drugs, the direct relief, and the medical service, those are all the three major line items that we get reimbursed at 75%.
Okay.
May I just want everybody to realize that, yes, we were given a list of names. It is first names only. It doesn't identify anybody out there.
Thank you.
Okay?
There is no
I
detail.
just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that.
Okay.
I wanted you to know, Mr. Chair, that thanks to both Tom and Tony, we've initiated changes within the department for greater efficiency in terms of reimbursement. Right now, the policy that we've adopted under the guidance of these two fine gentlemen over here is that no Norwood Town check is given to these recipients until there is prior approval from the state. So it guarantees,
Good.
guarantees.
The reimbursement.
We get into a jam, and that has been remedied, and it's.
There's not a lag time or anything like that?
No, we're lucky. We have a great authorizer in department headquarters, and he knows that this is the policy we've adopted in Norwood, and he's glad to help.
Good, okay,
I
excellent.
have a question.
Yeah.
Teddy, are there other functions your office does that's unrelated or not as related to the veteran services, such as parking tickets and all
No,
that
that's
kind
the other thing I meant to mention. Thank you, boss. Again, Manager Mizuko removed the ancillary duties that I inherited 19 years ago, which were digging into my time that I should have been spent on veteran services and concentrating on our budget and our reimbursements. But instead, there was other stuff that was taking up way too much time. And he has, I'm not gonna say thankfully removed them, but I don't miss them.
I'm sure you don't.
Yeah.
I don't miss them.
Good.
I'm gonna make a corny joke. Between the decrease in Teddy's budget and the increase in veteran services, the general government budget was saved by veterans once again.
And where did you move it to?
Which
Treasurer's collecting.
the treasurer's collecting the parking tickets. My office is handling the parking ticket appeals. The transfer program was moved over to the senior center, and there was a low-income heating program run out of Teddy's office that my office is taking to. What had happened over the years is we'd sort of dump things on the veterans office and said, well, maybe they have some time, let's do this, let's do that. And it sounds like on paper that that's an efficiency, and then what did it lead to is, A, they're not focusing on their mission, and the real dollars we started to lose is they're focusing on parking tickets in the transfer program and not on veteran services.
So Kerry is in charge of the transfer, because I've received a lot of complaints about that program and the company, the transportation companies.
Yeah, one of the things we may do at some point is look at whether there's a different way to do that same function, whether we sort of pull it in-house and maybe we hire a part-time staff and hire and purchase a sedan rather than, the ticket system, it's challenging. It relies on an outside vendor, there's some restrictions. If they're busy, they're busy, so we've toyed around with the idea. The thought was we'll move it to have Kerry take a look at it, take it over for a year or two, and then really sit down and say, okay, what does it do? Is there a better way to manage this program? So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a change in the next year or two with how we achieve that program's goals.
Okay, great.
Good. Anything further for Ted?
Thank you, Ted.
Thank
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ted.
I mean, I just want to say the total budget is $431,320. Okay.
I just want to say, 65% of it is going to direct relief to veterans. It's always been that way.
As it should be.
75% roughly.
Yep.
65, 70. Thank you all very,
Great.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a
Ted.
good evening.
Thank you.
Next?
Next.
Is this the long one? Yeah,
Yes.
this is the long one.
Yeah.
Where is
Page?
$25.
25. Okay, Mark, Sarah, welcome. Again, I apologize for, being a little late.
No, not at all, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, because, I noticed that we're very familiar with all the people coming in, but perhaps when someone starts listening, they're trying to figure out what department this is.
Okay.
So perhaps you could just mention.
Sure, we're meeting with Mark Ryan, and in particular, we're looking at Public Works, the Engineering Department, the cemetery, and the airport.
Yes,
So we have
airport.
you on for a lot of things.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Then you can introduce.
And then we have
And-
Sarah,
And I
Sarah
have
Winthrop.
my faithful assistant and business manager, Sarah Winthrop here. And Sarah's been
Nice to see you again.
a terrific job,
Great.
and
Excellent.
Sarah does a lot of the work on this budget, and keeping it in track and keeping me out of trouble during the year.
Yeah, well, it's, sure that's a full-time job for her.
So,
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Sort of the highlights.
Yep, 401 is Public Works salaries and operating expenses, and you see a decrease in almost $3,000 there. You know, we do have COLA increases under labor and as well as supervisors' positions, but there's some other items that there is a reduction, and so we do see a $3,000 reduction in public works salaries and what we used to call
Brenda,
incidentals.
That's not the number we
I
have.
don't think so, Mark.
Oh, some of the salary numbers were up.
Salaries and operating expenses.
Oh, okay. Oh, all
Yes.
right, all right.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, salaries increase, operating expenses, a little bit of a decrease there.
Okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah,
the
the
bottom
operating.
line in the budget we have right now is $3,670,387.
Yes.
Is that what we got for this particular budget?
Correct.
Tony,
In
the
line
question,
we were talking
the
about.
question is, if an override goes through, what would be added to this? I think you said there was some staff reductions in DPW when you
Not-
gave your presentation?
Not this
Not in
year.
FY '20, we're projecting them out starting in '21 through '24. The
21?
DPW would start getting hit pretty hard.
Okay,
The road money would go into the DPW budget. The Snow and ice money also, I guess, goes into the DPW budget depending on how you wanna look at it, so they would be well served by it, although the snow and ice is really a function of a financial fix, but the road money is gonna allow them to do what it is they do best.
Mm-hmm,
okay.
okay. All right. Okay, sorry, Bob.
That's fine. 410 engineering while we're here,
What page 29
page,
on ours?
Okay.
Wait a
Yeah,
minute,
we have
wait a minute.
something that's different.
I don't wanna go anywhere yet.
Leave behind
I don't wanna
Yeah,
go to another one.
Judy, wait, before we go to that, Judy has a question?
yes,
Yeah, we have down here capital expenses, and for 20-nothing, is that because your capital will be part of the capital implement?
that's correct.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. So,
Wait, I'm sorry, your capital is gonna be part of the.
Capital outlay.
capital outlay,
outlay.
Yeah.
yes.
The CIP plan, this one?
Yeah.
All right, now, engineering.
Engineering salaries, you do see an increase there, $10,000, that's for the two positions, the assistant town engineer and the civil engineer. And then
Primarily COLAs.
they are COLAs, absolutely, and then there's a little bit of an increase in the longevity pay, a slight increase there.
Colas and steps.
Step, there's
Yeah,
one
steps
step.
and COLAs, you know,
Yeah.
okay.
And the COLAs are the part of contracts, right?
That's correct,
Okay,
yes,
negotiated contracts?
yes.
Okay.
And then operating expenses brings you down to an increase of a little over $8,000 for engineering.
Okay.
Part of that was under salary seasonal.
Yes. What's the question?
Well, we had 2018 an actual of $5,000, and now we're up to $18,000. I know it's cheap money, but
What we found is that one of these seasonal employees had been, the assistants in the office had been getting costed to the main DPW line. So that was just a coding error, because I picked up on the same question and said, well, if we're only spending $5,000 or $6,000, why are we budgeting more? We found that it was just a coding error. It was one of the number of errors we picked up in the process of the conversion.
Yeah, I mean, I see, you know, from FY18, FY20, you know, there's a large increase in tree removal work. Not that I don't disagree with that. I think the question is, you've had your druthers, would you even increase that line item even more?
So now we're on 422, highway maintenance,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman?
yeah.
sorry,
What
I
page?
skipped a few
Before
things
we-
on you.
Before we go, Mr. Chairman. I'll
Okay,
just say,
David, yeah.
Mark, the GIS, a big jump, relatively big jump for that line item, it was from 18 to 19, and you're holding it steady for 20. What are we doing with GIS?
So GIS, after, I've been here 20 years, Mr. Ajar, and we're finally getting a real GIS system that not just engineering and DPW is gonna take advantage of, but police, fire, planning department, assessors, eventually the public will be out there, and that's just our annual contract we have for our GIS vendor.
Yeah. How many layers do you have?
We have water, sewer, drain, we got the parcel layer, the zoning layer.
Yeah.
We're gonna be adding some of the light department layers to
Yeah.
it.
Full topo?
Topo, we just taken Mass GIS.
Okay.
Yeah, that's sufficient, because now it's really built out. So there's, just the Mass GIS is sufficient for what we
I mean,
need.
if you needed, to do some repair work or any underground work, you have enough information from the mass system to be able to do that type of work?
It's fabulous. It really is.
Okay.
It just saves a lot of time
Okay.
and obviously money.
Good.
Yes.
Okay.
We did receive a $55,000 grant from the state to get our GIS system up and running.
Good. Okay. All right. I may have jumped the gun a little bit, but I did have the question on tree removal.
Obviously, on topo,
Yeah, we do.
engineers.
Hey, it's what we do. Whatever it is that we did do, what we used to do, which I don't do anymore.
So the next one, Mr. Chairman, 422, highway maintenance, operating expenses. There is a reduction of $12,000 there, essentially for infrared, which is repairing of patches on roads.
Yeah.
Everything else is level funded. I think there was a question on trees.
Yeah.
Trees are always an issue, but, we make it work. We
Yeah.
make it happen.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of work that you could do across the town if you really had the money to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Judy?
Could you comment on the capital expenses that's coming out of your operational piece here? There's sidewalks, capital highway construction. Could you comment on those?
Yeah, so two capital expenses, we have sidewalk construction. Last year, we had $40,000, that's to repair sidewalks around town or add some new ones. This year, we're asking for $25,000. We always could use more, Mrs. Langone, but this is one of those things that, give and take. Highway construction, last year, we had $350,000 to supplement our Chapter 90 funds. Right now, we're at $100,000. We're anticipating almost $900,000 in Chapter 90. This $100,000 will bring it to almost $1 million for roads. And as we've said in the past couple of years, we probably should be funding $1.5 million a year for roadway resurfacing if we really want to have a legitimate program in place. But once again, we're just fortunate to get extra money on top of the Chapter 90 money, and that's $100,000 this year.
Tony, is there anything in your CIP for any of that?
We list out the projected road pavement management plan that we'd be doing. Based on mainly the Chapter 90 money, we would go beyond that with the additional funds that are in here.
Okay.
May?
Sure.
Mark, during that capital, outlay committee meeting that I attended, and, there was some talk about different types of asphalt.
Yeah, resurfacing material.
Resurfacing. Could we do some roads with a different type of material that might be a little less expensive? What would be the pros and cons of
Yep,
that?
so many towns use chip sealing, and we tried it a few years ago. It wasn't well received by the residents. We could use it in some areas, maybe not in residential streets, because people just didn't appreciate having a different product in front of their house, thinking, why do I get the substandard one? Maybe some areas, I always thought like the Vanderbilt Ave area, which is large, wide roads and long, that could work down there.
Yeah.
But we've tried it, wasn't well received, but it is an alternative if the town ever wanted to revisit that.
Does it look really ugly? I mean,
Nope.
Nope.
It's just cheaper, it wears quicker, it's designed for low use is what it is.
Oh,
We
okay.
chip sealed roads quite a bit when I was up in Caribou, but we had 150 miles of road in a community of 8,200 people, so you chip seal a 1.5 mile road that's really a road between a couple potato fields because it gets 12 cars a day, and the chip seal works fine. For any roads with significant traffic, it wears too quickly. What happens is you'll lay it down and you'll say, all right, great, we got a new road, and it's gone a year and a half
Okay,
later.
so we have a large number of people in a small area that are using our roads that.
Yeah,
isn't
it's all
necessary,
volume
it's
driven,
not
as,
gonna-
as the
You
manager
may
said.
remember, we tried it on Geraldine Drive, and the residents had
Oh,
bits of the road up on their grass, and it was not very well received. The way-
It wasn't well received.
Great for wide country roads.
Okay, thank you. Just
Okay.
wanted to make sure we weren't missing an opportunity.
Page 31.
What's next?
Next is snow and ice, 423 is the budget number.
31.
Okay.
And we have a $50,000 increase there on snow and ice. Just trying to get to the average that we really should be at.
Yeah. I mean, if the override passes, I think it was it 250, Tony, I think, for,
It was 250 for roads and
250.
300 for snow and ice,
Yep.
which would bring us to roughly
You should be roughly,
average.
yeah, that's gonna be my point, you're gonna be roughly average. Okay, which is where you wanna be.
Targeting is to get through a normal winter. I mean, we
Yeah.
lucked out this year that it's
Right.
so far, it's been
Right,
it's been a mild winter,
Yeah.
but the deficit spending on snow and ice has become sometimes more than what we're budgeting for.
okay.
We have made some progress the last few years, but again, at that, I think I said it was 75,000 earlier, but 50,000 is the amount. That's maybe 6 or 7 years to get to average, not assuming cost increases, so when
Yeah.
you factor in cost increases, it's just, when are we gonna get there? Well, 8 or 10 years from now,
Okay.
who knows what will be.
All right, okay. Judy?
So, as of right now, today, I assume, well, you probably did have some expenses today. You've spent $350,910.30.
Right, and we figure roughly $10,500 spent this morning's storm, so we have a balance of, now we're projecting 263,500 roughly right now.
And that's not the schools or the airport, that's just,
That's not schools and airport, correct.
Okay.
That's a good thing.
I mean, knock on wood, a good part of the winter is already over, but we still have a good part of the winter remaining.
Bite your tongue.
We
I
do.
know.
but that ice storm we had must have been very expensive when we had a lot of that ice.
Yeah, and a lot of material went down, salt, definitely.
Okay.
One point I will make, to your point, that ice storm was incredibly expensive, but, 3 or 4 inch storm effectively costs us the same amount of money as a 6 or 7 inch storm, so one way you can really get drained in the winter is if you get a whole bunch of 2 or 3 inch storms where we gotta go out and plow and
Right.
salt, you'd almost rather just take it all at one whack and you deal with the storm. And you're
Yeah.
done with it.
Weekend storms.
It's all about timing, Monday was a holiday,
Right.
and we had to bring in people.
And a lot of nighttime stuff.
Yeah.
There's always a lot of nighttime, but if that was a typical Monday, you wouldn't have had that expense.
7:30 to 3:30 is the perfect time for
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
storm, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
If you're all following that schedule,
Yeah.
it'll be a lot easier.
Cool.
What's the balance in your snow account right now? I'm sorry.
263,500 roughly. Yeah.
Couple of good storms could, put a
No,
dent in
it's
that?
not gonna happen.
You're an optimist, huh? How long you lived in New England?
Outlook looks good. Glasses half full, the outlook looks good.
That's right.
I don't want to remind you about what happened last year.
Sarah?
Sorry.
Outlook looks good.
But those flying out on Sunday, we just don't want to.
Okay, you're fine.
So, the next one, Mr. Chairman, 430, waste collection disposal. This is a combination of budgets now. This is refuse removal, as well as the material recycling center. So the combination, it actually is quite a bit of an increase, and that's all driven by the contract we have with Waste Management. We go up 2.5% each year for all the items within the contract. And recycling is the biggest wild card. Last year, we were probably a little bit too conservative on the estimation on recycling, collection, and disposal, about $171 per ton is what we estimated based on, but this is all a market-driven now.
Right.
Cardboard's worth so much, glass is, actually a cost to get rid of now, and plastic is a positive thing, but we're seeing numbers are over $200 a ton to get rid of recycling. which,
I mean, I hate to say this, but is it almost gonna get to the point where it doesn't really it makes sense for the town just to recycle?
well, I think we all, that's a great question, but I think we all have to do the right thing.
Right.
We,
yeah.
we all have to do the right thing. But I will say, one thing in the contract that was negotiated, and the selectmen, Tom Maloney and Alan Howard, they said, right now we're paying $187 and some cents to get rid of solid waste,
Right.
okay? We're projecting over $200 a ton to get rid of recycling. But to their efforts, they said recycling will never cost more than solid waste, so. So that was a great thing, that worked out great. In fact, Waste Management has come to the general manager and said, hey, we want to renegotiate, and that's probably within the first 6 months. And I really enjoyed watching Tony tell him to, that it's not going to happen.
In the proper professional manner, of course.
So professional, Mr. Chairman, and
It's his version of trash talking.
Very good, Bob.
So with that said, we estimated recycling and solid waste disposal at the same dollar figure,
Okay.
$191, so.
Good. Okay. Yes, Bob.
So, it's 2.5% per year. How long a contract period is it?
It's 5 years till 2023.
Okay, that's good news.
My husband seems to think that we should have all the town meeting members go door to door in our districts. And you have such wonderful handouts that he thinks that we should go door to door and explain to people how to recycle so that we can.
So, thank you for
Use our
reminding
costs
me.
a little
So
bit.
you'll all be
I got
receiving, did you get it already? So this went out,
Yeah.
I don't
obviously,
wanna take an extra one.
obviously
Well,
before
that
today.
would be
These
great.
are extras.
You did have this, yeah. All right, there's an extra.
So, the manager asked us to put together a talk about recycling,
Yeah.
and,
Do you have just one sheet that says if you've got this, number, it goes in or it doesn't
Yes.
go in?
yep, and those
Because
are
I've
the,
still got the original one on my refrigerator
Well-
and I use it.
we just sent out new ones.
I haven't got it.
We're gonna get it to you.
I'll get you one.
Probably condominiums you don't,
No, we'll send you one.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe not.
but this,
yeah, that's my Bible.
This-
If it
this-
changes it, you
yeah.
still get it that way.
But this talks about recycling rates and how to do better and go to the website, and we added it in Portuguese and Spanish to, because,
Yeah.
we've changed, so
Yeah.
thank God for Google Translate.
Yeah.
Mark, you ruined my moment. I was gonna say, as it says, as the general manager, I'm personally writing everyone in English and Spanish. Did all the translations myself.
Is that part of the job description when you were hired, Tony? You'll be multilingual?
Yeah, exactly. So they don't test me on it.
I'm just curious, you mentioned contamination. Is there a reason why there seems to be more of an emphasis in contamination?
Yes, so,
Chinese
prior,
Taiwan.
the China sword, as they call it, they used to take 10-20% contamination, and they've since.
At the lower rate,
Yes,
yeah.
paying.
No,
Previous-
China used to take 10 or 20% contamination in the recycling that they received.
Right, without charging more, is what I
Yep,
meant, right,
all of
yeah.
a sudden, they just changed their whole policy, said it had to be 0.5%.
Yeah, which
And
is
and
impossible.
Waste Management, who they said in the meeting, said, we made a deal with the devil,
Yeah,
because now they gotta figure out how to get rid of this stuff. And they're looking to all the communities to pay for it. But, it's up to them to figure out how to get rid of it. We've got a
Yeah.
5-year contract, we're very confident that it's, I don't know, bulletproof's the right word, but pretty strong that, we're okay.
okay, for the next 5 years, yeah.
Right. So, but it's all about, where the product goes.
Yeah,
And what they accept.
yeah.
In my opinion, I have family members who work and have identified that recycling age number is just gonna go really crazy. because the Chinese are driving it, and there are no real other takers to take that
Yeah.
20%, especially when they've lowered or raised the bar,
Yeah,
so to
it-
speak. But my question is, I think is recycling is just gonna change over the years, because it can't sustain itself at that rate if people
It
aren't.
removes the incentive.
Right, you do lose
Right.
the incentive. And you said earlier, you're caught between doing the right thing and doing the right thing financially. And doing the right thing financially is gonna cost this town, big dollars, probably next contract. I think you did a great job protecting yourselves for 2022, 2023. The next one's, we're not gonna be so lucky. And then you get into, what is it that we really should be recycling going forward? And is that really the right way to go? I just think the industry's gonna change big time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where it's gonna land, but
Yeah.
it's gonna be
Yep, we can
different than
start
what you're
thinking
doing
about
today.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just not gonna be the same.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, the next budget 440 sewerage.
Something near and dear to my heart.
I'm sure we spent a lot of time on this, but we're level funded. We're level funded.
Now,
So,
There's
never a
no-
problem putting more money into this account. I want you to know that, and I want Tony to know that right away also.
He's not here.
Oh, okay, well, tell him afterwards.
out.
okay,
Just more study work, because that's your big line increase from a couple of years ago.
yeah,
Is there
so,
more
so
anticipated
for
work?
many years, Mr. Jar, that money was in engineering, that 40,000,
Okay.
and it just made perfect sense to put it under the sewer budget.
The I&I work and the I&I studies, that's separate from the grant money or any monies you're getting from the WRA?
It is, it is. The money from the MWRA we're using for the actual construction work. And a lot of this II study identifies areas we have to do the work in.
How close to being done are we?
We're on area, what we call 5A, and we have one more to do after this, 5B.
And
So-
the test results have been positive?
Terrific.
Good,
Yep, the process works.
excellent.
And-
Under drains are tough, as you know.
Yes.
Yes.
Drain maintenance, once again, it's level funded there. That's 441.
There's no hope of money from the override. Any additions, that's it. Right? Right, Kathy?
The next budget, water distribution, this used to be two budgets, maintenance and operations, and you can kind of see it in the description there, but we're actually a slight reduction there, and that's basically on the AMR, the automated meter reader system. We don't need as much there, so there is a $6,000 decrease in that budget there, and this is all recovered by rates.
Just wondering why the last couple of years you've seen such a big increase in cross-connection.
So cross-connection, we were so fortunate from fiscal 18 prior, we had just this individual, his name's Ken Green, he was his own consultant, and he used to go out and test backflows. Backflows are put in a lot of businesses, industrial buildings to protect our public water supply, that, you know, cleaning supplies aren't sucked back into our water system. And Ken has since retired, so we hired out Weston and Sampson and does the work. So their fees a little higher, but we've raised our testing fees. We do about 1,200 tests a year. Excuse me, there's 1,200 backflows. Some are done once a year, some are twice a year. So that $80,000 in expenses that we have with Weston and Sampson, we're projecting to recover a total of $118,000 in revenue on it, so.
Okay.
Also, if I might say, part of this also covers surveys, so they'll go out and seek new devices to test.
Okay.
So we should see an increase there too.
Good. Okay. And
I don't remember whether it was last year or the year before, we had some discussion about broken water pipes and that sort of thing, and replacing pipes for the residents. fixing the pipes
Oh,
to
for
the
the lead,
residents.
you mean the lead pipe?
Not, well, no, not the lead pipe, but, no, when people actually had broken connections.
Oh, right, right.
And didn't you start a program where, townspeople could go to you rather than to an outside person? Am I getting that confused with something else?
So for many years, you could, the town would replace it, but,
Yeah.
but it was just too cost prohibitive, so, since 2000, the water service is responsibility of the homeowner.
Right,
All right, so if they have a water leak, they're responsible for repairing it. However, if the water leak occurs in the street, it's a public safety issue, and we'll
Yeah.
end up replacing that within the street. So that's a benefit to the homeowner that gets that part, but we don't have a program of
I thought there was
replacing.
something where we were charging people, we were charging the homeowner.
For
not-
betterments. Yep. I think
Would it be sewer?
I think it was sewer.
Was it the sewer?
Yeah.
Policy
Okay.
the selectmen put
You were
together.
going over cost, Mark, remember that?
So we would clean sewer pluggies,
Okay, that's what it was, yeah.
and we started a fee system for that, yes.
Okay, and that's still ongoing and
Yep.
working well?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
people,
I'm sorry, I got it in the wrong
they,
department.
Okay.
they're very appreciative when
Yeah.
we show up to unplug their sewer, believe me.
Okay,
And the guys do a great job. They do better than any private firm. I'll match them against anyone.
Okay.
Mark, Mr. Chairman, I stepped down. Did we talk about water lining yet?
No, we didn't get into cleaning line,
Okay.
no.
I'm just ready.
Yeah, but let me know when. The next one is 491 Cemetery.
Did we pass over airport?
yeah, we did.
You passed over airport, yeah.
We'll do airport.
You wanna come back
We'll
with
do airport
that?
after.
Yeah, no problem.
So, cemetery, you get salaries, and that's adjustments, step increases there. And there's actually a decrease in the total budget, for operating and salaries and capital. And basically, that's because last year we had $65,000 in there for chip sealing, and that was the
That was
last
in the
year.
Cemetery, wasn't it? Yeah, it was a dollar, it
Yep.
is a cemetery.
Yep, so that was the last year
okay.
of the
Yeah.
product, so that's why there's a decrease of over $120,000.
Okay.
And what do you plan site improvements?
Site improvements is, so,
That was
what are you looking? It's just,
This
No, I think
shrubs,
that's-
loam, and seed.
oh, down here, site improvements, it's, yeah, the shrubs, loom, seed, it's just, it's materials there as far as beautifying the cemetery, flowers.
Okay.
You sure that's a capital? I don't think that's it, Mark. No? You
It's
wouldn't-
only
you-
$6,000.
You wouldn't capitalize.
The 15,500?
You wouldn't capital, oh, okay. You consider that a capital expense? Okay.
Some of these might ultimately move. I mean, the idea is that that's an investment in plant,
Yeah.
it's not a routine repair line.
Right.
Next.
Investment in plant.
Yeah, I like that.
Perennials.
All right.
All right.
Ready? Next one is 650 Parks Maintenance, and this is to,
What page is that?
probably be 46,
I've got
does that
it.
sound right?
50,
50?
at least in the
Our
book
number's a
we
little
have,
different,
yeah.
but
It's 50 in our book.
this is Parks Maintenance, and this is to maintain the 24 ball fields throughout town. Ground repairs,
Right.
whatever we do, cutting, aerating, fertilizing, seeding, aerating, top dressing.
It's
all
many
of
of the
that.
fields and school property also.
This is all the fields. The only fields it doesn't include are the fields at the high school.
Okay,
But all the other school fields are here.
All the other school fields are there, yes.
good, okay. All right.
So, Mark, we talked when Travis was here. Down the road, under his playground utilities, he's being charged, water for the fields. that are basically, it's a number that you're just assigning him, and then, you know, he's absolutely got no control over it, and I'm sure you're gonna say, well, you don't either. But I think at some point, we need to get all of this under one, and not have it split out. I mean, you're basically doing all of the work at the fields. And I think it would be appropriate to have the utilities under you as well, since you're doing all the work there and caring for it. Part of that care is the watering, and having it under the rec department really doesn't make any sense from a maintenance budget perspective. So we had talked to Tony earlier when Travis was here about at some point down the road trying to, this isn't the only line item where we have this type of situation, but it's probably worth exploring once we get through Eunice and everything and doing that.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, yes.
Okay?
Okay.
We've gone through all of these budgets and everything, and, you know, you're level funded, except for your salary lines, for the most part. Are there anything that you feel like you're not going to be able to work on, besides snow and ice and roads? Those are the beginning.
Mhm.
But is there anything else that you're sort of feeling really tight on and that is a major issue, but you sort of want to?
Not as a major, I mean, obviously, we talked about earlier, tree work, that's always a headache for us.
Yeah.
Some more funds there, but, you know, we can make it happen. Sewer and water, you know, that's recovered by rates, I think we're amply funded there, and I think we're fine, Ms. Haley, I mean, yeah.
One question that came up when we had Kerry McCarthy here is that her building, you know, the senior center is determined to be, you know, an emergency
Shelter.
a shelter area, and she doesn't have an emergency generator there. Now, does your department have portable generators that could be used in case of an emergency at the senior center?
The answer is no. What we've, two things I can say is, we just opened bids for the airport building, and Russ and I, if you asked us questions on, there was a emergency generator, the whole package. It's almost $100,000. But what we've done in the past is set it up for emergency generator. You know, the pad's there, the transfer switch is there, and when the emergency comes, you go to United Rentals and you bring a generator. And we do that now with one of our sewer pump
Okay.
stations.
All right.
We'll bring it in, plug it in, you know, if we know like a hurricane's coming, and so.
Right, I mean, many pump stations traditionally have had, you know, portable generators, I know that, yeah.
Yeah, so to answer your question, we don't have a portable, but my recommendation is look at it two ways, having it set up to rent one when the emergency sounds like it's coming up the coast, or, you know, you bite the bullet and you spend $100,000 and put one in.
Right.
But we'd be competing with other people who would wanna rent them too if we had an emergency.
Yep.
You know, in the area,
There-
so that one
there's-
wouldn't be available even for a rental.
There's that chance, yes.
Yeah, I think there are certain times, whether it be a pump station, that a portable might work out, but when you're talking about emergency shelter,
Yeah.
I think the last thing you wanna have to worry about is whether you have an emergency generator or not. I
Right.
mean, it should be equipped to handle it. There are other things that the emergency shelter are gonna have to worry about. That shouldn't be one of them.
Okay.
Maybe civil defense could talk about that.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
under those, new programs that are around about, looking at our environment and we participated in one of them, a conference where we answered questions and we looked at the area of the flooding.
mitigation.
Huh?
It has a mitigation program.
Right, so, under one of those programs, would there be an opportunity?
Currently, there are not. I'll be honest, my next priority is focusing on the high school, which does have an emergency generator. It's a much larger facility. The senior center was originally envisioned as a cooling center. We actually started using it as a cooling center several summers ago. Obviously, if you don't have power, the air conditioning is not going to work.
Right.
in the winter, obviously, you're concerned about heat, but the senior center was not envisioned as a major overnight shelter. It was envisioned as a daytime
Okay.
shelter. The Civic Center remains our prime shelter. The high school, unfortunately, when it was built, the SBA did not and would not allow us to fully equip it in the manner to make it fully usable as an emergency shelter. So I've been working with Paul Riccardi. Paul's done some internal wiring. There are some areas that need essentially some wiring work to make sure that the power goes to the areas that we would actually use. For a shelter, we wouldn't be using a physics lab, obviously, but we'd be using the gymnasium, we'd be using the cafeteria, those kinds of assembly areas that we need to be able to shift power to. And that takes some money. We hopefully have a small grant coming for an intern this summer to help us do some planning, focusing on the high school. That's how I envision it, to make it fully usable as an emergency shelter. I mean, the other problem we have with all of our public buildings is that we have absolutely no storage space for equipment, so that we can bring people in. But except for a limited supply at the Civic Center, and a portable shelter facility that we have in a trailer, that the Board of Health secured for us, we don't have a supply of cots and so forth.
All right.
So there's a lot of work to be done. There's not a lot of money in the system for that type of stuff.
Okay, just something to think about for next fiscal year, after this one, okay?
But again,
Sorry
this,
to
this
interrupt.
particular budget's level funded. No override money would go towards this. However, Tony, when we figured the base structural deficit, it included for the, that base one, what is it, for the town 1.5? It included the money for the COLAs and things like that?
Correct.
Right.
Okay. All right. Looking at,
So, Mr.
Water
Chairman,
and
we're
sewer.
gonna do capital, Tony?
Well, I just wanna bring it up, it doesn't reflect in the, but since we have everyone here and we have some good images, we brought this up to capital outlay. It's not reflected in the budget, but we'll be proposing an additional $500,000 a year in water lining. We've been trying to line as many of the pipes in town, it helps with flows, that's actually something indirectly that would help with our ISO rating. Mainly it's about the quality of our water. And of
Tony,
course,
is the cost on that in this?
It's in the capital plan, it's not
this
reflected in the
CPI
water
plan?
sewer budget.
Okay.
Even though it sort of will become a recurring operating cost, but I just wanted to make sure to show folks, anyone who attended capital outlay saw this, but for anyone here in the audience, this is what and anyone watching at home, this is what a water pipe looks like when it's clean, when it's really ready to go. So that gray material is the lining that we do, so that's what the inside of a pipe looks like after we've lined it. Before we've lined it, that's what it looks like. And this is
Looks
actually
ugly.
a pretty good pipe, to be honest with you, for how they usually look. They're usually a lot thicker. So to be clear, that pipe, that section you're seeing right there, that's what your water flows through before it gets to your house in an unlined pipe. And again, that's on the better side for the quality of water pipes.
and
So-
I've also seen other pipes where, you talk about thickness, well, there is no thickness, it's all corroded away.
Right,
I mean,
that's
it's the rust that's holding it together.
That's a good clean pipe. That's almost
Yeah.
the pipe we would say we almost don't need to do.
Yeah.
But the water that you drink and the water that you bathe with runs right through a pipe like that into your house if they're online. So we'd like to correct that for the community over time. Currently, it's at the pace that we're going, we're looking at 25 plus years before we have the whole community lined. We'd like to cut that time down quite a bit. Not only is there a benefit in the quality of the water, fewer breaks, quality of water to the public, you have fewer breaks, you have better flow, you have fewer leaks, which again, we pay for our money from the MWRA, so that would save money as well, and then the pressure of the system gets improved as well. So I
And
just
that
think
would come from MWRA loans?
no, this is,
interest
we're
free.
proposing to do, in addition to our MWRA loan, to fund in our budget $500,000 of water lining a year. We do borrow about $500,000 to $600,000 a year from the MWRA at 0% interest, The problem is doing that every year, the maximum that we can do, we're looking at
So this
30
really
years.
isn't an operational budget hit because it's paid for by utilities?
Correct.
Right.
But it's a significant amount, it's, in my opinion, it's very necessary, again, we don't want our pipes to look like that, we kinda want them to look a little bit more like
Yeah,
that.
how many years would that reduce the time to finish the system, would you say? At least 10 years or so?
Yeah,
I mean,
cut it in half.
At minimum, it's cutting it in half.
Yeah, okay. All right,
So just, it's obviously for all the right reasons, it's the right thing to do, but when you look at that pipe, the water is treated to make sure that the leaching of rust isn't entering our water.
In other words, it's still clean. It's still
still
clean.
clean.
Yes.
You do get rusty water,
You get
that's,
rusty water,
that's,
but,
that's what we want to,
bad
the
mouth,
aesthetics,
leaching
and as Tony said, the water flow, all right,
Exactly.
increases
Right.
significantly, so.
But the water's still healthy.
Yes, it
Even
is
though-
healthy,
Even though it looks busted.
it is healthy, absolutely.
So that's all I wanna bring up for the water and sewer portion.
Okay.
okay,
So, airport, is that?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, anything else?
Here.
Just the airport, you want to,
Sure.
Page
Rest is outside.
38.
your
What
favorite
page?
department?
I have so many more.
Kathy, what page? Airport?
I would-
38.
I know we passed it.
Yeah, page 38.
All right.
Page what?
38.
38.
38.
What time? Nice picture.
Good evening all, thank you.
Good evening.
That was taken November 29th. So you can see all the flooding.
When was it?
November 29th.
Oh.
So we had the historic flooding and you can see what happened to the airport. The only thing that really saved us was the embanked runways and taxiways, so.
Well, water has this nasty habit of finding its level, and it's built out of a wetland, so not surprising.
We had to, there were some cost overruns with this project here, which was straightening up the taxiway. We had to add some erosion controls, and there was
Yeah.
some question from FAA why we needed that, and we just showed them the photos, and that ended the discussion. So, most of the folks at FAA are
Pictures with the
pretty
thousand words,
familiar
there you
with
go, yes,
the
yeah.
airport, so.
Okay.
What I have is a few changes that I made. I think I have already talked to Tom McQuaid about our budget, and it's really just changing around some of the numbers on the sub-accounts, but I can start at the top, however it's
I think,
easiest.
maybe just tell us about where some of the major changes are, and,
Okay.
we can go from there.
Well, obviously with this new system, where there's not a direct translation between the new sub-account and
Yeah.
the sub-account we already have, so the biggest change is gonna be the building that will finally be fitted out.
Okay.
It was built in 2008, about $2.2 million. I think the town share was about 115,000. That was with FAA and state participation. This time, it's just Mass DOT. It's about 1.5 million to complete the building. The town share will be about 75,000.
Yeah.
So we're really looking at about $200,000 to build a $3.6 million facility. And we're looking at probably July, August timeframe. Mark has already alluded to the fact that we have a low bidder that the commission will vote on tomorrow to issue an award to. That is the biggest change. Currently, and what we've been doing since 1999 is we've been leasing space on the airport. And so that change is reflected in here as well. I can pretty much start at operating expenses. The utilities, we're looking at a $2,000 increase, and that would be any additional utility costs. We're already paying lighting for the building. We've been doing that since 2008. So that would be one of the sub-accounts that you'll see that increase. So again, that's $2,000, and that's the 5210 utilities. The next one, expense for the equipment replacement repair, that currently is sitting at, unless you have something different, it's 31,000. And I've asked, actually, that to be level funded back to 8,100, and to take the 23,000 from there and put it into the sub-account that's marked maintenance of grounds, 5243. So we're just switching around some numbers.
Okay.
Maintenance of
So,
build.
Russ, just so you
Yep.
know, they do have those changes.
They do, okay, great, so I don't have to explain them then.
Okay.
The other sub-account that will, capture some of the costs for the new building is the maintenance of buildings, the 5242, $10,000 there. Rental expenses, again, this is what I was talking about earlier. We just, we're gonna not have to pay to lease space on the airport, so we're gonna drop that down from 25,000 to 7,500. And that'll really just cover the first, the quarter that we'll be in when we actually start transitioning over to the new building. Level funding on airport security, engineering services, which also includes any independent cost estimates that we have to have. Stenographers, level funded. Telephone, we're actually lowering the cost on that, just because we're getting some economies of scale right now. Office supplies, level funded. Travel, conferences, level funded as well. And then miscellaneous expenses, that's another sub-account for any unforeseen costs for the new building that aren't captured in the maintenance of the building, and then the $2,000 increase in the utilities.
The new building, will that be solely for your use, or will there be in areas where you can, maybe get some rental income?
We haven't really talked about that.
There's no rental income,
Yeah,
that's solely ours.
It's an administration, yeah, strictly.
Equipment building and then
The
his
building near
office.
the tower?
Right, so the lower floor will be fitted out, aside from the bays, we'll have shops
Right.
for maintenance, and then the upper
Equipment
floors will be off.
storage,
Yes,
yeah.
equipment storage. HVAC upgrade, and as Mark talked about, we're gonna have a generator, a standby generator there
Okay.
as well. And then upstairs is where the offices are, my
Okay.
office. The commission will have an office, there'll be a security badging office, kind of an archives file room, and then a very nice classroom, training room.
Okay.
So we've been working with an architect, Fenwick McCready, which has done a lot of the administration buildings throughout the state for the other airports. I believe they're doing Plymouth right now, so they're actually doing the architectural work for them. And so we're really looking forward to kind of consolidating everything. We got 3 new pieces of equipment this past year from Mass DOT. It gives us an opportunity to really work on the equipment. And,
Good.
and then you've probably noticed that the $90,000 for the matching share of the wildlife fence, and that's a $1.8 million grant if we get it, with $90,000 for the town. That is going to be a borrowing item, so it's been taken out of this budget.
Okay. I mean, historically, we pretty much borrowed for those types of items as opposed for paying
Right.
either out of the operating budget or free cash. So
Right.
it's not unusual that
Not
we're doing it
unusual,
that way.
no. The wildlife fence, and this is really why I brought the photo in, the wildlife fence is 20,000, I think it's 20,000 square feet.
yeah.
Yeah, it's 20,000 square feet. I'll show you very quickly. I'm unfortunately going to be in somebody's way here. You can actually see the fence line, even with all the water here. You can see the fence line, it actually runs here and then jogs east and then to the south. It actually ends up somewhere out here where the approach lighting system is, and then wraps around the lighting system, and then we pick it up here again. And it literally kind of circumnavigates around all of the embanked
Wow.
runways. It's a 10-foot wildlife fence, also acting as a security perimeter fence. It was installed in 2001. We're actually in the midst of installing it in 2001 when we had 9/11, and good thing we had the fence actually going in, because that became a requirement for all these general aviation airports. The reason for the photo, in part, is to show you that, really the run of fence line, but also the environment that the fence sits in. It's in a very watery environment, and the fence has, the FAA likes these projects to go out 20 years. This is inside of 20 years, in large part because of all the water. And the airport's flooded twice in 2010. So this, what you see here and think is pretty dramatic. In 2010, in both March and then again in April, it went completely underwater. And then over time, that's just deteriorated the fence. So we've had to do a lot of patchwork, and we're trying to get to the end of that now. This was a $500,000 fence when we installed it in 2001. It's now looking at 1.8. So.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Bob.
so, just a couple of observations, because we've been working with the airport on looking at past several fiscal years in terms of the revenue production from the airport. And it's been a good story. I think particularly the latest report we did was for FY18, where I noted your actuals were at $356,000 in expenses. The revenue generated through the airport was well over $400,000 in FY18. So that marks a continued good trend in showing a net positive for the bottom line for the last several years. So I congratulate you on that. I do have one question. What has been the impact to date, if you have a number, for the landing fee structure, which is new?
It's about 16,000 we've received to date. We've received 2 quarters. We conservatively had expected about 20,000 for the year, and we're already at 16,000, roughly 16,000 for 2 quarters. So we know in the winter months the business tends to drop off a little bit, but I think we're going to exceed the 20,000. We may be closer to 30.
Okay, good.
And obviously Mark has talked in the past about putting up another hangar, and that's more revenue production for the airport as well.
Good.
So.
Would the federal government help with that, or we would have to pay for that?
They would not. They don't tend to pay for hangar construction
Okay,
type
so-
projects.
The private
Right.
entity would build it.
I see.
Right.
But
We would lease it.
We would recoup it.
We would get the
Yeah.
land
To
lease. Right.
That's the way to put it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
David?
A couple things. The whole fuel issue, the cost, any
You know,
update
glad
from
you mentioned
Roger's
that.
office, or?
I'll try to bring it to my next meeting. I put through a public records request to the Department of Revenue. I do have a response, which I don't understand, but I'm glad you mentioned. I'll provide it. I did get a response from DOR providing the formula and giving me the example of how this is the jet fuel tax.
Yep.
It works, and I have it. I read it. I don't know if it answers my questions, but I will print it out and bring it to the next meeting just so we all have a look at it.
I do want to commend Bob and Russ and Mark for the efforts that they started a couple of years ago on the airport. I mean, the results of that has brought forward additional revenue opportunities. We're to the point now where we're actually turning back money to the town, and I think that's helpful to not just us, but the taxpayers, to show that we can change and we can do things a little bit differently. That makes it less burdensome on them. So, the other one is the snow and ice. So is the 40, where do you stand on your year-to-date number on the 46,000?
We're actually in pretty good shape. We're about not even a third of the way through that right now. We've had a mild winter.
Right.
But, you know, and even small storms like last night, when we have to move quickly, we have a mixed precip type storm, we have to bring in a lot of contractor equipment, and then there's overtime for my assistant. So we're still well within budget, but we're just hoping to end this winter before
So
we.
is that number in particular, is that your 5-year average? Is that a good number for you? I know, because we're trying to build up,
Right.
on general government side anyways, raising it to a point where we believe we're at a much better average. Is this your average that you feel comfortable going forward?
Maybe a little bit more than that, but 46 to
Close.
50, I would say is fairly
Okay.
close.
in a given year, if we wanted to really address that, that's a lot easier to add the $50,000 and $20,000 to the airport budget than it is to add the $400,000 that we need in the general government
Yeah,
side, or the
okay.
$300,000 that the schools need.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, anything further on the airport or for Mark with his many departments? Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
And we know the buck
Great
stops with you.
presentation, yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
Russ. Beautiful
Thank you.
picture.
Take care, Russ. In terms of where we want to go from here, I mean, the hour is late. I'd like to put off maybe doing managers and incidental budgets until next time, if that's okay.
We could probably go through at least the manager's budget relatively quickly.
Okay.
I'm
All
gonna
right.
attempt to join next week's meeting via Skype, but I don't wanna put my faith in technology in that case. I'm nothing against technology.
All right, why don't we do your budget?
What page are we on?
If you wanna start with one and do the selectmen real quick, I mean, these are some of the town hall administrative offices that don't really
Yeah.
see substantial changes.
Yeah,
So in terms of the selectmen's office budget, the only change again is our cost allocation there. Other than that, there really isn't much of a change.
okay.
There's a reduction in the full-time salaries.
Right, to account for a different staff being in place.
What page are we on?
One.
Page one, sorry.
Page, oh, that's where I am, okay.
You're down about 19,000 overall.
Okay.
No, it's the next, it's the next one. No, next 5.
Okay,
Next tab,
Next tab, yeah.
okay.
one more page.
I'm in the wrong tab. Okay.
There we are. Good, okay.
So the NLD, the
That's
light
one.
department allocation is 7,500, that's,
From the
what,
selectmen's office?
Commissioners.
Right, it reflects the cost is that the board of selectmen are the light commissioners, so the
Gotcha.
portion.
Mhm.
At some point, we may look at the formula where some of these numbers were derived, but we're just
Right.
using the existing formula, which has
got it,
been the one in place for
Yeah.
that's fine,
Okay.
thank you.
quite some time. Any questions on the selectmen's office?
Nope.
All right, general manager's office, similar here, really no changes, on the salaries, other than you have the, what's allocated to the light department, slight increase in the seasonal, part of that's moving one position over from muni office, but also looking at our seasonal staff and, what we're able to get out of seasonal staff. There's a few $1,000s in there for a potential reclass, I'm restructuring my office a bit, instead of having 2 executive assistants, there's gonna be an executive assistant and a management analyst. My proposal is to keep it the same grade that the other executive assistant was at. Personnel board will be voting on it this weekend,
Okay.
this week at the next meeting, so they may vote to bump it up a grade. So there's some money in there to account for that.
Okay.
At some point and it may happen mid-year, there is at least one position in my office that we haven't looked at for a while in terms of its grade, that's probably undergraded quite a bit.
Okay.
I am generally a fan of putting the money in the budget and then looking at a reclassification instead of saying, great, we need more money now, let's go find it. Sometimes that doesn't always work out, but I would anticipate a reclass of one of the positions in
Okay.
my office mid-year.
Okay.
The operating expense budget, flat, the training budget is probably good for now, but that also includes procurement, as well as other staff that are assigned to my office, so at some point we may need to look at that number. We did bump it up quite a bit last year. The procurement courses alone are $700 a pop. So if we, for instance, if we had somebody that left the procurement office and we brought them on, within a year, I'm dumping $3,500 just to get them through their basic procurement classes.
Okay. All right.
How many more of these do you wanna run through?
Well, I mean, can we run through them?
It's
Let's,
really
let,
we can go over them later, but some of these are, again, they're relatively quick,
why don't we do a few just to have less the next time?
Yeah.
Okay, coming up next on page 3, if you wanna go in order of what we have in front of us, the Finance Commission, just a COLA there for the portion of the clerk's salaries. Other than that, your operating budget is flat.
All right, most of it is related to the audit.
Excuse me, and I wanted to ask, we haven't seen the audit? Don't we usually see that?
It's in draft form, I don't think they haven't completed the final.
Actually, we got it yesterday.
Oh,
Okay,
great
yesterday.
timing, thank you.
If you move along, page 4, Finance and Accounting. Again, the only change here, that you'll see is the salary portion that's allocated to the Norwood Light Department. And again, these are numbers that we've always used, we're just programming them actually into the budget. The operating budget for that department is flat. The increases for the department head and full-time staff are just our contractually obligated steps and COLAs. You will notice there's a decrease there in the full-time amount. There was or is a part-time benefited position booked to this department that we're gonna reassign to another department. It's currently a vacant position. We're not actually reassigning the position, we are actually eliminating the position in this department, and you'll see an increase elsewhere. Page 5 is the assessor's office budget. There's a large, the salaries are just again the contractually obligated step and COLA increases.
Well, we'll be meeting with the assessor, won't we, at some point?
Is he on next week's list?
Yeah.
He should be, yeah.
Is that one?
That
Yeah,
one,
you can, or just to be quick, the only real change in Tim's budget is the cost of the reval, which has come down.
okay.
Treasury's budget we covered, do you wanna go through town council?
Town council quickly, I mean, it's it's basically flat
Yeah.
with a slight allocation of the light department, but it's a flat total.
And we, that maybe need to be looked at some point, but still
Yeah.
proposed to be level funded. Human resources,
I mean, we'll meet with the department,
yeah,
whoever they're.
We got one person there left, so.
Well, I thought Michelle,
Poor
was-
Che-
I thought
poor Chelsea.
Michelle's doing a little bit of part-time work.
She is, I don't know if that'll include,
right.
arriving to a budget meeting.
All right, go ahead.
Because I see on here salaries went from quite a bit of money up.
Yep, that's where we did have a decrease of a position elsewhere, and we would propose to add a part-time benefited position here.
All right,
it's not
so,
okay.
so it's not an overall net increase, it's a reallocation from a different department.
Correct.
And why are
Okay.
we having this part-time benefited?
It's currently part-time benefited. The challenge for us is that for, part-time benefited for us starts at 20 hours a week.
Yeah,
So if we wanted to have it part-time not benefited, you really gotta limit it to just 15 hours a week. Because you can't average 20 hours a week over the course of the year without having to pay benefits. So once you're at 20 hours a week, you're paying the benefits. So if you want somebody for an actual part-time job, you're really looking at 25 hours a week. And to try to split it into two 15-hour week period positions, which I've done before, you do start to see a lot of attrition. You're sort of rotating out those people over time.
free training.
But really what we're trying to do, we're looking at some other structural changes to the HR department. We think that it's probably been a little understaffed for a while. We think we can get a better product out of changing the staffing structure a little bit. We're gonna try to make the two existing positions, not the HR director position, but the other two positions in there, a little bit more fluid between them to try to have a little bit more flexibility in how the office operates, to sort of modernize how we're functioning. That net change shouldn't have a net impact on the overall salaries though.
Okay.
Any questions on the HR office budget? There's one increase in here for additional training. We're trying to look at management training, and one of the challenges we have is we have certain departments where we have very specific training we need to do. We then continue to have training needs throughout the year. OSHA's compliance coming into play is one of them. Where do we put that in? Do I put $10,000 in the DPW budget and then I find that it's here? So we're gonna try to function, put more of our management and supervisory training through the human resources department and some of our town-wide safety training. And then the department budgets will be their specific conference attendance lines, and for police and fire, some of their mandatory required training. Do you wanna go through IT?
No, we'll meet with Mark next week.
Are there any other budgets that you wanna go through that you don't wanna cover next week? I don't have next week's list, Tom, do you have it handy?
Oh, we did that.
The only other one I have a question on is elections and registration, not as much for FY '20, but for FY '19, I mean, the cost of the special election is, how is that proposed to be funded?
That would be in FY '19, we'd need a reserve transfer for it.
Reserve fund transfer or
Or you could reappropriate money at town meeting.
town meeting, one or the
I
other.
think that would be cleaner,
Right,
Which,
town
go
meeting.
before town meeting.
yeah,
And that's the other thing, you know, we're moving along in the fiscal year, and we don't want any surprises that all of a sudden people are coming, we gotta have this today, we gotta have this today, when there was plenty of time to put in a warrant article to go on the special. I think last year you knew about that, and you thought you'd be able to
Yeah,
get
we'd like
that
to
cleaned up this year.
Reduce those over time. I mean, some of them you can't, you know, due to the time you go to print for town meeting, so to speak, you can't reasonably know. This is, I mean, it's now a known expense, whether you pull it out from somewhere, The only concern I might have with that is when we need to have the money appropriated for the election. The selectmen will call, it's an administrative item, I'm just thinking that they call an election, we then need to make the appropriation for it. But either way, we'll find $26,000.
Okay.
One night annual.
There you go.
Let's not be overly optimistic, Bernie.
For next week, you have, information technology, we did HR, the inspector and the assessor. Do you wanna just, we can certainly have those department heads covered, come here. Their budgets really haven't changed. If you wanna go through those briefly, we can, and then that'll ease your, next week you can spend entirely on light broadband and police and fire. It's your
I wanna
policy.
see them, don't we?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it now.
So information technology, the salary's not changing other than what's allocated to the normal light department, but we're mirroring the rest of our department structure. In the past, we'd always just dumped IT.
Wait, let's get back, okay, all right, go ahead.
Page
There we
9.
go.
Let me know when you're ready.
Yep.
In the past, we lumped all these department salaries into one line. We've broken that out to be consistent with all of our other departments, where you have the IT director's salary, and then the full-time staff salary, then of course the portion of IT that supports the light department. Their operating budget is up quite a bit, and mainly that's an increase in the cost of software as we begin to bring some of the Munis modules online. That cost will grow over time. We will see a year where you'll probably see a dip or a small growth when we're able to get rid of our support for our legacy systems, but that won't happen until a year or two after we've completely moved away from the legacy systems. And there'll still be some support costs there, but we'll see a $20,000 or $30,000 drop.
So anything that's in here is not, well, let me phrase it differently. The 1.7 we allocated, this is in addition to?
Correct.
Okay.
Because some of these will be ongoing recurring software maintenance
Right.
costs. So we're trying to build it into the budget as it comes along as, okay, this is now a normal recurring cost. The startup cost and the initial cost, so
Right.
what we're booking in FY18 is all coming to that. Next year, we'll continue to expend that 1.7 million, but as items become normal software, we're trying to book them in there.
Yeah, why is there such a large increase for data processing? Is that because of the transfer?
That's Munis, that's where it's the line that we cost our software system to.
Yeah, okay,
Data processing is probably a dated term at this point, but.
yeah, okay. All right,
And we wanna jump to the, the town clerk and the elections and registration, just to make, one point there, the clerk's office, I believe it, Tom, we made a change from the clerk's office from,
So we had one salary in elections and registrations before, and then we moved that person over to the clerk's office.
Okay.
So all the other costs related to elections, we
Now,
retained,
now
like
there
the
is some
part-time
reimbursement, isn't there, from the state on some of the elections that we
Board
get?
registrar's salary comes, we get something back for that.
We got, when we had to do early voting, the state gave us, I think, $8,000 or so,
So it offsets some of the costs.
but still cost us money.
Would we like to just take a quick look at the, so any questions on the town clerk or elections or registration?
No.
We wanna jump back to the assessor's budget in case anyone has any, incidentally, if you're not watching home, I think today's Tim and Son's birthday, so happy birthday to our assessor.
So
His birthday present will be
is
made
Tim
to
prepared to come in? Tim
Next week.
is
I
prepared to come in
I wanna
next
see
week?
him.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
He's planned on it, again, the only change to his budget is that, the reval number's gone back down to its normal number as we book the cost for
Right.
the decennial reval.
Okay.
There's really no other changes there, his, salary increases are the normal step and COLA increases,
We
his
still
operating
wanna
budget
see it.
came in flat
yeah,
other
I
than
mean, we still wanna see Tim, yeah,
decrease.
okay.
So you do want to have the assessor come in?
We would like
Yes.
to see, yeah.
Building inspector,
Where-
What
where-
page?
where-
we're looking for it.
Building commissioner.
What page is the building inspector on?
Yeah.
That's where I.
21,
21?
21.
Skipped over a bunch.
Okay,
So is everyone at page 21?
yeah, this looks like basically a flat budget other than
And that's what you see with
COLAs.
a lot of general government, sort of the town hall department, so his cost increases are the contractually obligated step and COLAs. There was a small $1,000 decrease in his operating expense to bring, one of his budget lines, his training line in line to what the historic average has been, so other than that, it's a pretty vanilla line budget. If you wanna jump back to page 14,
Can I, wait,
sorry.
excuse me
Yeah,
one minute,
go right ahead.
I'm sorry, you know, you see these things year after year and sometimes things slip on you. And one of the things that unfortunately one of the line items in anybody's budget that gets hit fairly quickly in times of distress in budgets is travel and training. And I just quickly saw the salary travel allowance.
Yep.
That the 15.7, can you explain that one?
Yeah, that's what we don't provide vehicles for our municipal inspectors, so that's their travel
Oh, okay.
allowance for using those
Reimbursement.
Okay,
vehicles.
reimbursement for
And
you.
Stipends.
and actually, in the
This-
prior,
it's
prior
stipends.
budgets, we had
They're under
that down
stipends
as
and
an
stuff.
operating expense. It didn't say salary, it said travel allowance, but since it is taxable income to them and compensation,
Right.
Yeah.
we moved it up to its
Okay.
proper place.
That's
Yeah, the
good.
training school line is for their courses, that line did decrease, that's just reflecting really what they're spending on average, I don't believe in cutting training or professional development.
Right.
But for most of the inspectors, a lot of their courses end up being short local, courses that end up being generally low cost, there's usually not $700 courses that they're going to or $800 courses that they're going to. Once they get their certifications, they gotta go to some trainings for CEUs, but they're usually able to do them locally.
Okay, I'm just, just in general, I was making a statement that people do seem to want to cut those lines, and they're very important lines.
Yeah, I generally don't, except in this case where it's just really bringing it into what they're averaging.
But I couldn't quite imagine what this,
And just to point out, we have a total cost for the building inspector's office of $460,000, plus obviously the benefit cost. The department brings in over $1 million a year, so if you were to pick a department, it's actually our most profitable operation. Do we wanna pick on?
Because there are other costs that those fees are covering, the engineering that goes with, there's a lot of other costs.
Right.
Just not to think we're actually making a profit.
Do we wanna look at page 14, the municipal building expenses? Cause there's a couple of things in here that are, sort of calling things out a little differently, I guess. Page 14. So this is both municipal building and municipal buildings. So the top of the operating salary line is actually the custodians for, town hall. What you have down below on the operating expenses are some of the costs for this building, but we've also costed out expenses for, this is where you see Forbes Hill, this is where you see the Morse House, the OCC. We may at some point add some other buildings here. We just wanna make sure we're trying to provide a cost for some of these buildings when we do get some work done on them.
they have a line.
They're town-owned buildings, and usually they've been getting pulled out of this department budget here or there, but now we're just trying to cost them out and make sure that they're there.
Now, would these costs go under the hopefully soon-to-be facilities?
Eventually, in a year or two, once we're fully implemented, we'd have everything in one budget. I mean, you might leave some of these out if they're so small that it's just, we just need to carry a line, but the idea is that all our facilities expenses eventually will be,
Okay.
aligned
Okay.
in one budget. But for now, this is a holding place.
Right.
Town
Just,
report line, the next
one
page,
question.
page 15, I'm sorry.
What site is not here is is it the Vets building or?
VFW.
VFW?
Yeah, I was actually just
on-
thinking that,
on
we could
Dean Street,
probably
where,
add that, it's a,
is that a triple net lease, they pay everything?
Yes, that's what it is.
Right.
yeah, we still may wanna carry a $1,000 line
Right.
just in case, but
In the capital plan, you'll see that we did list that out, that, we need to at some point take a look at that building. So it's
And-
included in capital, not capital, the capital improvement, CIP, but it's not anywhere in this year to do any kind of work on it.
And to continue, I know the board of selectmen, have indicated that the lease for the OCC, comes up soon, and are we asking, I presume that the current occupant may or may not identify building issues that would have to be considered?
it's possible that would have to be worked into the overall lease arrangement. Generally, you sit down with the occupant and first say, is there an interest, and do we go out to bid to lease it, do we look at doing something else in it? Usually when you have a good tenant and they're paying their rent and it's a good use of the building, obviously you wanna continue that
Right.
arrangement.
It's been great, yeah.
We'll probably look at all options when it's up.
I think that was brought up Tuesday night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And you're gonna start to initiate something on that.
Sorry, having that discussion.
Mhm.
You make a great general manager's office with bar right there and everything, but.
I thought you were getting the Forbes mansion.
Somehow.
Yeah. That's the office, the Forbes mansion's the home.
Oh, God.
Everyone says we should have a governor's mansion, why can't we have a town manager's
Yeah.
mansion, right?
Mm.
Somebody just find me the $500,000 to pay for it.
All
Any
right.
questions on the municipal building?
Nope.
Very small budget, page 15, the very next page, we are reducing the cost of town reports. We're going to print less physical town reports. This is one of those items that we've just got to at some point accept that we can slash the number and print less of them. We are ending up with bigger piles of them, so that at some point is something we would need to look at, but we would never be able to go completely digital with town reports. We do need to keep some hard copies, but we're gonna print less and less as time
Okay.
goes on.
Alright.
The following page, page 16, this is just general government. So this is where we cost a lot of different lines. This is where some of our operational flexibility comes in. We book the town meeting expenses here. So sometimes when we need to hire a consultant for something for not just general government, but any need, and people say, gee, can you do this? This is where we're pulling some of those funds from. I will point out one particular item in here, the eyewear item down the bottom. One of the things that we were able to do, as you know, that is a benefit, we are contractually obligated to provide a number of our bargaining units. Instead of bargaining, budgeting, I should say, $250 or $500 in 23 different departments and having to budget the full amount in case we need to use it, we looked at what we've actually spent and we consolidated it all to one line, and we're able to shave $8,000 off it and still have a reasonable
Sounds good.
number in there. So that
works.
it makes common sense, and there's savings that we're finding just through a better budgeting
Good,
process.
okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I saw Summerfest, and I was actually trying to figure this out the other day. The, nice winter concerts at the high school, how are we paying for those?
Almost all donations.
100% donations.
100% donations, wonderful.
Yeah, and you know, that's such a fantastic program that even if we had to pay for it, I'd say we'd go ahead and continue paying for it. I mean, we served each week this week, there were a little over 200 people at each concert.
Okay.
Page 24. We already discussed this, but just to, actually, no, that's just the traffic control and fire alarm budget. So you could bring that up when Mr. Collins or Mr. Maurice are here. No substantial changes there. Two other quick things to point out. Page 28. This is the start of booking the facilities department.
Right.
Just to let everyone know, this would be the town absorbing these costs as we go forward, as a general government cost. So that's the salary, the actual department head salary is not that amount of money, we need to move those lines around. That's the department head, I believe, plus the.
I was gonna be disappointed.
So if he's watching that, that's not the intended department head, that's where we first book the costs, and then
Wait a
later, that's actually.
Gotta have a process.
That's actually the department head, plus the mid-year addition of the two operating positions, and then the position below is the administrative support for that department. So the total amount is what's correct there. We will be spreading that out, but just so you know, if you get a question as to what that line is. That miscellaneous expense is actually one of two things. We really don't have a contingency line in our budget, and in theory, when you're budgeting, you should actually have a contingency of making sure you're not budgeting to exact zero. That was what was left, so to speak, so we put it in there for two reasons. One, if the Willet does close, I don't know if the school's gonna turn over to the town or not, but generally what happens in a lot of communities is they have closed the building and that becomes the town's responsibility, so I need something in there to maintain even in a mothballed state. The other item is, in addition to the capital money last year, which I'll talk about in a moment, that will be some of the startup money for the facilities department. We actually may incur some costs in moving people over, and it'd be good to have a little bit of a budget line to take care of that.
Okay.
My proposal with the facilities department, if you know, last year we did allocate $250,000 in the budget for cash capital funding to begin paying for some of our capital with cash. My recommendation will be we move that over to be the facility department's operating budget so that they have the flexibility to actually right away begin taking care of projects in the year and throughout the year. We cannot build a facilities department without giving them money to have flexibility to make repairs and make changes and alterations to the building.
And what line item was that one?
That one, Tom, it's located elsewhere in the budget.
Yeah, it's located somewhere in 900s.
Yeah.
9:30.
Oh, okay.
If you wanna swing all the way down to page, well, is there any other, we wanna go over the shared cost budget or the benefits budget or anything at this point, or
No,
health
not
insurance
really.
or schools, or do you wanna move into
Too much.
OPEB?
Let's go to OPEB.
All
I
right.
just have one question on page 92, capital projects,
Page is open.
Page 92.
92, just.
That's the
can you
line for
give
the
us
facilities
The
department.
250, okay,
No,
that's
what
it.
page is
So
it?
last year we
Right,
allocated
yeah.
$250,000 to do cash capital funding.
Yes.
My proposal is that becomes the facilities department's money for
No.
this year. This is again a line we'd like to build up cash funding and capital, we just aren't there yet, but The facilities department is really the one way we're gonna see savings and
Yep.
efficiencies down the road.
Understood, thank you.
We didn't move it in the budget because it would have had an impact on the formula and everything, would have been complicated, but. Alright. Any other questions on these general government department budgets?
Do we have, what do we have for, stabilization fund?
It's balance 4.4 million.
It's in here, oh, the balance?
Yep.
I don't have the balance off the top of my head, about 4.5 million.
And we're continuing our repayment of the DPW project as normal.
And how close would we be to getting to the level of stabilization fund that existed before the DPW project?
Next year.
Next year?
Yeah, 2021.
My recommendation would be, beyond that, we still continue to make
Right.
that allocation, find another
Absolutely.
way to make equal amounts of that allocation.
Because we're not near,
Stay with the budget. stay
we're
with the
not,
budget.
Yeah.
we're not where we're supposed to be.
Nope,
Correct.
not close.
So we're ready to talk about OPEB?
Quickly, we hope.
Where is that in the budget? What page?
OPEB?
Oh,
Yeah, is it in here?
It's in the health department.
Are you looking for our annual contribution to OPEB?
Yeah.
250,000.
That's in section,
It's where we built the shared costs for
Not health.
health insurance.
and that's way down. Okay, never mind.
So this will only take about an hour and a half for me to go through.
All right.
You'll be all
Wake me up
alone.
when you're done.
OPEB funding and GASB. So as the board is aware, but for folks at home who maybe didn't catch the presentation Tuesday night or aren't as familiar with OPEB, OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. It's our retiree healthcare liability. This is a liability shared by every city and town in Massachusetts and the Commonwealth itself. And it refers to the actual liability when we talk about OPEB, the liability on our books for this benefit, which is legally mandated in Massachusetts. So I know some folks do like to point out that while retiree healthcare is not common in the private sector anymore, it is mandated by state law in Massachusetts for cities and towns. All except, I believe, 7 who never appropriated the original local option back in the 1950s. But for the rest of us, it is the law as law says. And it consists of a legal obligation similar to pension funds. So we are legally obligated to provide the service, and we're legally obligated to continue to pay for retiree healthcare. So for many years, communities funded OPEB on a pay-as-you-go method. GASB, which is the Government Accounting Standards Board, which is a quasi-federal agency, I just realized it's an independent agency, began changing reporting requirements for municipalities by requiring them to report the liability or our obligation to pay, similar to the way we treat pensions. There have been further changes in GASB reporting requirements that have continued to make OPEB a bigger challenge for communities. So GASB, which again is the Government Accounting Standards Board, issued new standards in 2016, GASB 74 and GASB 75, and those refer to just their, I call them their procurements, or their edicts is perhaps a better word, that they just number them, and it's GASB 74 or GASB 75. But that began changing our reporting requirement. So this means when we have our annual audit, it changes at how those audit numbers look and how the town's overall financial position looks. It's important to note that these are the standards that rating agencies look at, so we may not think OPEB is real, we may not want to deal with it, but the rating agencies say we have to deal with it, and the Accounting Standards Board that dictates how our audits are supposed to be done, say we have to deal with it. So, what are the changes that are brought on board with GASB 74 and 75 is that governmental entities, of which we are one of course, are now required to report the full liability of our OPEB liability on their balance sheets. Now this applies to every community in Massachusetts, and it has a dramatic effect on our net position. So just to be clear, net position, which used to be net assets, because they like to change the terms we use for the same things. That's really the town's book value of our assets minus our liabilities. Retained earnings or owner's equity in the private sector is what it's also known as. And I always tell people to take, you always take it with a little bit of caution with municipality, because again, our road network is an asset, but we never really be able to sell the road network. Plant assets like the high school, sure, it's an illiquid asset that, you know, you could in theory sell a building, but we're not a private business that could just stop that business function. The schools are not a business-like function, so we couldn't decide next year that we're out of the business of providing a high school. So, you know, always taking that position with a little bit of a grain of salt, because it's a little bit of a funky calculation for a governmental entity that has to continue to operate. So the close of FY17, we had a net position of $41 million. Now that's not cash in the bank, that's essentially the value of the town if we were a business. And again, take it with a grain of salt, we couldn't simply sell the high school and not operate a high school or many of our other facilities or operations. But our net value is about $41 million. Now, GASB has a substantial impact on how we report our net position for the town. And again, this is happening to every single town in Massachusetts, perhaps except those 7 hill towns that never offer the benefit, but in the Commonwealth as well. So at the close of FY18, our net position is now negative $62 million. So we took a hit of about $100 million by having to book the full liability. So what that means is on the town's balance sheet, we have all of our assets over here and we have all of our liabilities over here. So now that liability is the total amount of money we should have in the bank for our OPEB obligation. The net change is down about $100 million. I was speaking with counterparts in Wellesley recently. They took about a $60 million hit on their net position. They're a lot better funded with OPEB, they're a lot better funded anyway than us, but their OPEB trust fund is a lot better funded. Interestingly enough, their OPEB liability itself actually went down, but their overall net position still decreased as a result. So this is not something that's happening to just Norwood, it's happening just about everywhere. So, the rating agencies, and for anyone at home, just to explain what that means if you're not familiar with it, we have a credit rating just like a individual does, just like a business does, and either Moody's or Standard & Poor evaluates our credit. They evaluate the credit worthiness of the town, our ability to pay our obligations, and then we're assigned a rating which determines what we end up paying in interest on debt. And that's everything from if we're borrowing $100,000 for a DPW vehicle to paying for a $100 million middle school. So on the low end, it may not make that much of a difference if we're borrowing $20,000 for a piece of equipment, but when you start talking about larger projects, it starts to have a big impact. So the rating agencies, I was at a meeting last week where we had somebody from Moody's there, they're not treating GASB 75 as a credit event, which means they're not saying, okay, this has changed, we're now downgrading your credit. However, it's still impacting the credit worthiness of a potential borrower, which we would be, or any community. So what the rating agencies are starting to focus on, realizing that because you're changing the way you're looking at the numbers, it's creating a big pay change, but the town of Norwood's still gonna operate the same next year as we did this previous year, even though we're seeing this huge change in our balance sheet. But they're beginning to focus on the funding schedule, your program, your management, and your efforts towards funding progress. And what that means is that they realize that all of a sudden nobody can come up with that $100 million in cash. There's a handful of communities that are fully funded in OPEB. Somebody made a comment that one of them, I think it's West Newbury, well, they're a real tiny community. They're a wealthy community is what the difference is, because the size of the community relates to your OPEB liability. We should be putting away tens of millions of dollars a year, and we're not. So a town that may only have 40 employees, the proportion of their budget, it's a big hit for everyone. There's no one for which this is an easy cover, except some of the wealthiest communities in the Commonwealth. So what they're looking at is, well, what are towns doing? And really what they're trying to assess is the quality of your management to assume whether your creditworthiness is good. Knowing that we can't just solve this like that. So currently we have about $2.3 million in our trust account. The fully funded amount is well over $100 million. It's supposed to function the way a pension fund functions. We've been contributing a base $250,000 per year. Our plan has been to transfer any funds remaining in the health insurance budget at the end of the year. Hasn't happened recently because again it comes into competition with everything else in the budget. That money would otherwise become free cash, but really to solve the OPEB issue, you're going to need to find a number of sources that you transfer money from and a number of solutions. There's no one thing you can do and say, boom, let's do that. Chatham recently got a local option from the state special act where they're going to have a real estate transfer tax on non-owner occupied homes over a certain value, and that's a 1.5% tax, and that's 100% going to OPEB. So that might be something that we look at down the road. Somerville is doing something similar. They're not allocating it to OPEB. I would prefer to allocate it to OPEB. They're allocating it to some other housing
So
Mm-hmm.
you
related
want to
issue.
explain that detail a little bit?
Sure, so if you sell a home that you don't own, because it's a business-like transaction,
Okay.
you can implement a transaction tax on it,
Mhm.
and they're having that transaction tax, and they're having it go towards a OPEB trust fund. What most towns do, you could, in theory, if the legislature allowed you, do it for any home sale, but you don't wanna penalize somebody who is just selling their own single-family home. So by saying if it's non-owner occupied, in most cases what that is somebody who owns a rental property, for instance, of 2 or 3 units, would be subject to that tax because it's not the actual home that they live in. We've done no real research on it. We don't know what the numbers would be. I just know that Cape towns have done it for many years to fund the Cape Cod Land and Water Trust. Chatham's the first community. They have some great leadership there that's doing it to fund OPEB. So that might be something we want to look at, but even then, that would be one stream of funding for OPEB, wouldn't solve the problem. So the $250,000 hasn't increased at a reasonable pace. There's a typo in there. One of the challenges with that is that, again, it comes into competition with everything else in the budget every other year, so it's tough. We're doing well by at least having that base amount in there, but we're not increasing it. It'd be nice to increase it every year and to be able to tell the rating agencies when we go out to borrow that, hey man, this is going up X dollars a year, and it's all part of our plan to get there. Many communities transfer a percentage or dollar amount of their free cash to OPEB. That's actually what a lot of towns have been doing every year. They say, all right, we've got 5.7 million in free cash, right off the bat, 10% is going to OPEB. We're not quite in a position where we can do that just yet, but that's something to think about for the future. And that doesn't really have a negative impact on your bond rating because you're taking money from one fund balance and putting it into another. You are taking it from a free fund balance and moving it into a restricted fund balance, but it's still showing up on your books as cash on hand or cash in the bank. We are, as part of our financial plan proposal, is over a 5-year period, starting I believe FY21, to start fully costing the enterprise funds out to fund their portion of OPEB. That does come with a rate increase, but we're able to do it, whereas the limitations of Prop 2.5 don't let us say it's time to just bear this responsibility. But those costs really should be borne by the ratepayers in that case. We would look at start doing that over 5 years, that they have to get extended out depending on the utilities markets.
So he's saying within a 5-year period that the enterprise funds would be fully funded for their
No, to be
OPEB?
clear, we would be at the arc. We would over 5 years be contributing what we should be contributing to be fully funded down the road.
Okay.
To have the utilities be fully funded in 5 years would be an enormous amount of
All right,
money.
okay, I just wanted to clarify.
7,000% rate.
Just wanted to
increase or something
clarify
crazy
that,
like
okay,
So, yeah, no, they actually don't use ARC, which is your actuarially required contribution anymore. They use a different term. Now they're looking at progress towards funding goals.
Okay.
But basically, it's still your ARC, so we should be putting in, let's say, $5 million a year for the utility funds. We would get them to that number over the 5-year period. There's still many years until you're fully funded down the road
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
As I said, rating agencies aren't treating GASB 74 and 75 as a credit event, but they are factoring in funding towards progress. For years, it's sort of been, what are you doing? And more or less, are you doing something? So if you could say, yeah, we're doing something, they would say, all right, we recognize that your management understands it and you're trying to address it. Now it's more, is what you're doing working? Which way are you heading? And are you doing something that's making progress as opposed to just, are you doing something? I had a ratings call several years ago where we said, we're doing something, it was next to nothing, but we're doing something. They said, great, you put some money in there, you've got some plan. Now they're starting to say, well, is your plan improving, is your plan actually working? So if Norwood was putting $5,000 a year in and our plan was to increase it $10 a year, they would quickly say, well, you're not getting anywhere, you're not even making any real progress. So, as I said, there's no easy solution to OPEB. It's a legal financial obligation under state law. It is not something we can change at the local level. Any changes to the benefit provision will reduce the liability overall, but that does come at the cost of we'd be sitting down and seeing what we can change, and changing retiree benefits after they've worked for the town for 30 or 40 years, and then trying to change it after they've left is not the most equitable thing in the world. That's not to say that we couldn't make some structural benefit changes that would apply to everyone that would be beneficial, or change the split down the road. A lot of communities are talking about moving their funding from their pension obligation over to OPEB after it's fully funded. We've talked about that as well. A couple of the challenges with that, it's a very good theory, and it's I think what everyone's going to do. It's a couple of things we've got to remember. Pension funds in the Commonwealth were supposed to be fully funded in 2018. When the state first made the determination, very wise decision on the part of the Commonwealth back in the late 80s to start mandating pension fund contributions. Everyone was supposed to be fully funded by 2018. That's now, I think, 2029 or 2032. We're on schedule to be fully funded by 2028. The challenge is you've got to get to fully funded, and then you've really got to adjust your discount rates down, and you really got to get beyond that 100% funded. Wellesley, incidentally, was at one point 120% funded. The market tanked and they dropped well below 100%. So they have that fear that I would have, that we would say, oh great, we're fully funded on paper and we no longer need to contribute this big amount, start spending it on OPEB. Now worst case scenario, we just move it back into the pension fund, but you're not making any progress, so.
Well, we were 107, 108 at one point.
It's 108, yeah.
Yeah.
And what are we now, 82, 83?
Right, so really, you've got to, what will happen is, you got to get to that number, and you continue to make that contribution every year, you'll quickly get to that percentage you need to be. You got to get to that 110 or 120, and then really, really ratchet down your discount rates, and really say, well, look at where, we know we'll grow at 3% a year in the fund, project it at 1 and tell us what we need to have in there, so that you can absorb those hits in the market, because that fear is that we're all projecting that in 10 or 15 years we'll be there if the market continues to go and our fund grows and everything's good, and then we'll really have an amount of money. My guess is that will happen. It may take longer than when we're fully funded on the pension system, and that'll probably be the final piece to OPEB. In 10 or 15 years, we'll be maybe half the way there or 3/4 the way there to that arc, and then that'll be that final piece that comes in and says, oh, we're actually doing it. Part of that might happen by the Commonwealth lumping pension and OPEB funds together and making them just sort of one obligation. That's very complicated, but I could see them at some point doing that and just saying, look, it's one obligation. You're legally obligated one way or another. It's now, instead of a $180 million liability and a $100 million liability, you got a $280 million liability, and figure it out.
So, my question is, on the pension fund, we know that we're using the money actually comes out of it to pay people other. We're building up OPEB, we get the 20 million, 30 million, when does it actually get used?
When you can actuarially determine that what you're putting in and what you're taking out won't decrease the fund. That's a number that an actuary needs to determine. What David's referring to is we're putting money away in the bank, but then we're still pay-as-you-go for our retirees. In theory, there'll be a point in time where we're taking the money out of the bank and just putting money in the fund, the way we do the pension system. But you've got to wait till actuarially you're at that point where, and I'm making these numbers up here, but all right, we've got $50 million in the fund, we got to contribute $6 million this year, and we're going to take out $2 million, so it's going to actually continue growing until we're fully funded. What that number is, I don't know off the top of my head. There's $2.3 million in the fund. I think we spend $4 million on retiree healthcare a year. So it's going to be a while before it actually actually works. And the benefit of keeping it segregated for the time being is that you can put it in slightly higher yield instruments, and you're sort of keeping the money locked away, and all the interest is building up in it. So that's a way to kind of say, look, it's going to be a long time before we're drawing from that fund, but we will eventually get there.
I think you just answered this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So, determining the funded amount, the fully funded amount, that's an actuary that's doing that for us?
Correct.
Okay, how often does it update it?
Every year. It's
Every year?
done as part of the annual audit.
Every two.
Two,
Every
yeah.
2 years?
Two.
Okay.
Questions on OPEB? Nope. Comments, thoughts?
We'll have some money that we can put in from GIC this year into OPEB.
We should, we're hopeful we will. Again, in previous years, that money's gotten moved to other items, so.
And I think that's the intent of the FinCom. That's what we would certainly recommend that would be done. Okay. All right, thank you, Tony.
All right, thank you.
You have anything else, Tony?
I do not.
Anything else
There's plenty
from?
of other presentations, I can pull another one up.
That'd work for me. I mean, we may have difficulty getting out of the building down the road, but, if you'd like to put another presentation, or we could certainly listen.
With our eyes closed.
Well, in any event, did a lot of work today. Anything further from the board? Again, we're meeting next week to finish up the general government and shared budgets, and then we meet in March with the school department. So,
Mr. Chair?
yeah.
I will not be here next week.
Okay.
I am away, so I'll miss that meeting, but I'll be
Okay.
back with you.
Okay. We can Skype you in if you'd like.
Yeah, that's true, you could.
Yeah.
Do we have to take a vote on that?
Skyping?
Mm-hmm.
At the
That is
appropriate.
not in the budget.
Yeah, at the appropriate point, we would do that.
I do have something else to ask Tony. Tony, relative to the override, the 5.95, when you started the presentation tonight, you said the town was in the deficit. The structural deficit was 1.5, and the schools were what, 2?
Correct, that's sort of the projected deficit for FY '21 through '24. FY '20 is,
Okay,
right.
okay. So the balance then would be somewhere around, what, 2.5, which is additional amount for expansions and programs and things like that.
I think you
And I
could,
think the roads are in there, and,
right, so the override number that we came up with, because that first year
yeah,
you're putting money
there's
into
several
override
components to
stabilization.
it.
Correct, that's designed to fix over the course of 5 years. So
Yes.
fiscal '20, you actually have that $700,000 that's going into override stabilization. Fiscal '21, you would have a little less that goes in, and then you'd be drawing it down. It's also important to remember that that $5.95 million permanent addition to the tax base also grows at 2.5% a year. So that amount of
Right.
money is also sort of factored into those projections. So that's what erodes that structural deficit away. So that $5.95 million is added into your permanent
I
base.
guess
That's
what
how
I'm
it
getting
helps.
to, and of course, Paul Bishop brought it up last night, and we've all said this, it's gotta be clear to the voting public. Clear, but also simple enough, so you don't need to know all this, all these little
Yeah, and
words and all things.
And that's always a challenge, because everyone says, well, wait a minute, my tax bill can't go up by more than 2.5% a year. And it's like, no, it actually doesn't work that way. It's, we can't increase the tax levy 2.5% by a year, your bill is individual, but we tend to say that.
Well,
instead
I'm,
of it's-
I'm thinking about the 5.95.
Yeah.
There's two sides to that. There's the town side, there's the school side. First is the structural deficit, and then underneath of that, there's different things. It would help me, and I'm sure it will help others, to go take that side by side, list the components underneath, and when you get down to the bottom, you add them up, and you can say X% to the schools and X% to the town.
We can and try to come up with a sheet, but there again, the stabilization part is sort of to balance us over the next 5 years. The road and snow and ice money is fairly simple. The operating money, the details are really in the school budget. As you know, many of the items they've cut already. Those are some of those items that would be restored.
Yes, I know that, and that's what that money's for, but I know we've got some stuff, stabilization to go forward to kind of close that, but I think there has to be a very simple way to account for that, so the public can look at that and say, look, and then the other thing is the taxes, and Bill went over it the other night, $389 and some odd cents. Last year was 102 on the 2.5%. In other words, get it out there in simple math so people can understand it.
We'll see if we can put something together. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm not always good at simple. I sort of say, here's the answer, and then I
Well,
probably do
here's
too much,
simple,
but.
5 million for the schools, 950,000 for the town, including the stabilization.
Say that again?
It-
Well, no,
It's basically 5 million for the schools. They have 3.2 million that they have to cut this year, that if we get the override, they don't. And then they want to restore $1.8 million worth of programs.
Well, I guess I see it a little simpler. 5.95, school side, town side, and down. I mean,
We can, but we can get, I gave the.
how
the
you
board something
allocate
that's
it after they get it, it's their problem.
Yeah, I gave the board something that just, it's basically the 3 lines. We can get that out fairly clearly and simply, although I don't want everyone to think that it's the town side and the school side, well, what's the town getting, what's the school getting? I mean, it's all community money, it's all supporting the community.
You
We
and
there
I
are a lot
know
that's
that,
going
but
to-
that's gotta be split out the way they need to see it.
I gave a simple one sheet to the board that just
Right.
had the 4 numbers and what they were for.
If the override passes, the formula we now use, 55-45, that will innately change, because the schools will be getting X more than the town. So
Right.
whatever that ratio turns out to be.
Well, that's what has to be tried to explain
Right.
in simple.
So
So-
that going forward, the schools, this is not the number, but, 58% instead of
Right.
55.
Yeah.
Right.
Something like that.
All right.
We can try to get a couple of simple one sheets together.
But don't forget, if the facilities go through, it's the 3rd largest budget, that's gonna now become a shared cost.
Yeah, that'll change things.
So
That'll
that
actually
will
probably help the
change,
school
so.
department, to be honest with you. Long term, with the budgeting in there.
All right. Anything further? Hearing none, I take a motion to adjourn.
I move for adjournment.
Second.
Made and seconded, discussion, hearing none, all in favor, opposed, unanimous. Thank you.